OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, you're very welcome along. It's Monday morning, and it is a very excited OTB AM. Is it a very excited, generally, sports world out there this morning? Everybody's on fire, are they? Give us your thoughts in the YouTube comments. You need to be signed in, and you need to be subscribed to our YouTube feed to be able to comment on it. You don't have to be on Twitter. You can get us at Off the Bowl AM, or you can always get us by text or by WhatsApp on 0879 180 180. Johnny Ward is here. Johnny, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ger.
Colin Bowie is here. Colin, how are you?
Ger and Johnny, good mornings.
Colin was just so sorry. The Kansas City Chiefs have won in an all-time classic, 38-35, with a last-minute field goal to win it. Slight controversy at the end, in that a fairly ticky-tacky holding call was called that prevented the Eagles getting the ball back with 2 minutes, minute and a half left on the clock. And so interesting to see that all sports in every part of the world are always ruined by officiating. So I don't want to talk about officiating again today, but apparently we're going to have to talk about it in lots of different formats. Before we get into that, though, in the bit there just before we came on, Colin was humble bragging about the fact that he's got back into five-a-side as an owl lad.
It was six-a-side, which
Six-a-side.
makes a huge difference, actually,
massive,
I find. Massive.
Technical players can shine.
Well, I've played in this specific game. That was the last time I played 6 months ago, and it was five-a-side, and the lungs would be gone like after 20 minutes because you have to cover that extra space. Six-a-side is beautiful. But I was saying on Friday's show, so I thought I'd put a wrap on it this morning by telling Johnny off air that I made my comeback. I didn't expect it to make it on.
Yeah, in fact, it was off air for a reason.
Show. Exactly.
Because it's too
I didn't
boring.
think it was
No.
good enough.
What are the injuries like?
Well, I was saying to Johnny there, I was pleasantly surprised. Woke up Saturday morning anticipating being in bits. I was okay, but I didn't do much running. I kind of stayed in the middle, and that makes a massive difference. See, if it's a six-a-side game, you can do that. You don't have to run.
Remember your fellow, was it Liam O'Brien from Cork? I believe when he went back to play League of Ireland, joined Cork City, he used to just literally stay in the centre circle and not move at all. And just talk to
He's
these
not a
guys.
dub.
What?
I think
he was. He probably was a dub, actually.
Manchester United's Liam O'Brien.
Yes.
He was a dub.
Ended up with Cork City. And yeah, I know what you mean. You just kind of try to, your class will win out.
You're also an owl lad, Johnny, and you're still playing five-a-side?
I've had a bad run with five-side. I've been accused of being semi-retired at the moment, which is worrying. But I'm 40 as well, so it's a lot harder.
I met somebody who used to play five-a-side against you. He was like, he was very nice until he felt there was an injustice in the game, and all of a sudden he would come alive. That was yeah.
Who is that?
I'll tell you off air.
I think I'm not sure about that, to be honest. Yeah, I've played some good players. On Kevin Kilban has come along, played a bit.
I tore something in my elbow last week playing hitting golf balls at the driving range. First time I've been out in about 3 months, and now it's like, this is just a sign. Don't do anything. Don't even try anymore. Anyway, Patrick Mahomes. I've watched the highlights this morning. I couldn't stay up. It was too late. Can't do this show and watch that. Mahomes gets injured at the end of the first half and jumps up all gimpy, and it's like, ooh, and they're 10 points down at half time. You're like, ooh, this is it. And then in the second half, he has the longest run of the season. You're like, wow, this guy is superhuman, unless the injury was not as bad as. I don't know. I mean, because this is new levels of heroism. He's named MVP, second time MVP, first time regular season MVP, wins Super Bowl in, I don't know, is it ever? Certainly it's like first time in 10 times. So you're looking at an all-time great athlete doing all-time great things. He's ahead of schedule for where Tom Brady was. And we were talking about this on Friday. It's like, we're never going to see anybody like Tom Brady again. And Mahomes obviously runs too much, so he gets injured too much. But he's also pretty good at just throwing the ball. So maybe he'll just throw the ball for the last 10 years of his career and win 3 more Super Bowls.
Well, there's any number of stats coming out this morning of Mahomes' already greatness, but one is he's the first player since Kurt Warner in 1999 to win the NFL MVP and Super Bowl in the same season. But I think you said before, Ger, that you're talking about one of the greatest athletes in world sport here, and that was before last night.
Yeah, he's a LeBron James at his peak. He's a Lionel Messi at his peak. He's at that stratospheric level, but he's also doing it in a sport where the opposition are, 27 stone, and they're legitimately trying to crush you in every moment. But But so they were up against the number 1 ranked defense, and Philadelphia had no sacks last night. That's obviously not all on him. It's on the offensive line, but it is an incredible achievement. So anyway, we should get to the main story of the weekend. Ireland are going to win the World Cup. Is anybody in any doubt? Is anybody in any doubt?
Well, Alan Quinlan will be on. He obviously played it down a bit last night on TV, but it was like, I was at the game Saturday. It was strange being there and thinking that the French were coming over, feeling that like the French fans were really up for this. They felt like the underdogs that they were, and it's hard to believe you're watching the top ranked 2 teams in the world.
Don't give any of that stuff away.
Let's make this official.
So here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. Performance rankings. Alan Quinlan, as we've said, 8:05, probably a little bit before even. Sports pages, 8:25. Sarah Dunham's going to talk hurling at 8:50. Mike Carlson, we're going to rouse him from his slumber, having been up till 3:30 this morning.
We should probably do a Super Bowl show where you effectively just watch the Super Bowl, don't go to bed at all, and then come in and present at 7:30.
Further to my ripped elbow, like too old. Can't do that shit anymore. It wouldn't. You think, it'd be hilarious, wouldn't it? It wouldn't. It'd just be like drooling man, head slumped.
You'd be surprised.
You'd be fine until 10 a.m.
Yeah, and then you get fired for saying something stupid. 7:36, time for the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
We're breaking protocol here, and instead of starting in the red and moving to amber and finishing with the green, we're starting with the green because Ireland are in green, and we figured that we need to give this enough time to let it breathe. It's one of those situations where there are literally too many storylines to be able to talk about this properly, like unless we had, weeks to do it. And actually, it turns out, luckily, we do have weeks to do it. So we will get to all the storylines. If there's a bit that you think we haven't covered today, feel free to get all busy in our comments about, you didn't talk about this. Like, I know, okay, fair enough, but there was just too much happening.
Yeah, well, I have one way to frame this, right? As you say, we have 2 weeks to talk about this. I watched the match on TV, and I couldn't get over the atmosphere and the tension in that first half and how exhilarating it was. You were both at the game. What was it like?
I missed the whole Sexton bawling his eyes out at Ireland's call. I couldn't, because I was actually filming to send to the kids, going, but I had missed the whole, him being unable to sing it and then desperately trying to sing it. And the camera kind of panned away from me, just sound on Johnny Sexton for a minute and a half here. Let's see this.
No, because then it becomes something that he's probably consciously uncomfortable about.
Well, it doesn't matter.
It was real. It wasn't contrived.
No, but
to be fair, it was great. That was amazing. I thought that was absolutely amazing.
He was asked about that post-match.
Could you see it?
On the big screen, yeah. So I wasn't close enough to, but yeah, absolutely. I was very, very striking. It was Ireland's call is quite maligned. Our national anthem isn't the most inspiring at all. Whereas I think most of the Irish were more up for the La Marseillaise because we love that anthem.
We do.
But Sexton was anyone who saw that was like, Jesus, this is something special about to happen here, I think.
He mentioned afterwards that they discussed the significance of the anthem in the build-up to the match. So it didn't come out of nowhere.
On Monday, Brian O'Driscoll and Craig Doyle, who the picture camera caught Craig Doyle in the crowd.
That was one of my highlights.
Sorry, I've completely forgotten the name of the guy from Ulster who had come in with them, who was obviously part of Brian's documentary. I'll look that up for you in a second when my brain starts working again. But they come in on the Monday, and like Stephen Ferris had mentioned, the pre-match as well. And obviously they had decided that this is something about the togetherness, that the slow build-up from here to the World Cup. They've got to reach certain emotional pitches, because you can't do this. They can't be crying for the anthems for the game against Italy,
I was in Canada last week on the way over, 8-hour flight. I read the Willie Anderson book, basically top to bottom, and he was on about the anthems, and this is before kind of the Ireland's call time, and he made a point of saying that it was sort of a bit of an issue, and it did get me thinking, how we sort of, where are we with Ireland's call? Is it kind of half we mock it and we half kind of like it? Because I remember liking it at the start, but now I kind of struggle to get going with it. But anyway, so when I was getting the flight back, I watched the Jack Charlton documentary. And is there a little bit of that now, where we have an Englishman taking over what is going to be the greatest Irish rugby kind of spell of all time? And a very, very likeable one at that.
Very likeable.
Is there anything bad to be said about Andy Farrell?
No, it's funny. It's how those north of England people are very similar to us.
It's true.
You know, not those softy Southerners. It's but you know,
people, the players seem to love the camp. They seem to love playing for him. And I don't know, Ger, what you thought of the game Saturday. Like, I was at 3 Irish rugby games last year. I was totally underwhelmed because they completely bashed the 3 teams they were playing. This was a proper test. There was a great atmosphere at the game, and Ireland battered France, really. I thought they were worthy of... I mean, the stat about the time that was spent, you know... What was the stat, Colin? You had it?
Yeah, so France scored 19 points despite only spending a total of 57 seconds in Ireland's 22.
57.
Or another way of looking at it is Ireland kept France out of the 22 for 79 minutes and 3 seconds.
There were so many moments as well. Like the Quinlan try was like something out of the Super Bowl. The way it was worked, it was like that's like something you'd see from a kind of a running back making a false run or something like that, and
an end around.
And then the French first try. Like my one gripe with rugby at the moment is that the players are too big to allow space for free movement of players like that. And that French try was insane. The handling, everything about it. And I was looking at the clock after half an hour. It was like, if this scoring continues, like this is going to be a basketball score.
The ingenuity was incredible because Ronan O'Gara was on the show yesterday with Joe, and he said you don't practice that little scoop pass that France did. And I mean, the margin for error is so fine at that level of the game because that could have been another try for Ireland. And then 12 seconds later, France are touching down. Like,
it was a pretty good try. Some missed tackles in the middle, which maybe if we'd lost,
it was the combination of was it Murray and Keenan, was it, or Hansen bumped into each other basically trying to stop down. But I mean, like the pace to get there, and like you say, it was a throwback kind of Barbarians-esque try from 50 years ago.
And sorry, I was right beside, like, effectively where... Now, there seemed to be a lot of French fans there. When Alele Blue was like 10,000. Yeah. So I was beside, like, a big portion of... And when maybe when they broke the first tackle in that move, or the place absolutely lit up. I was like, Jesus, I've never seen this before. Visiting fans, the French fans could almost feel, oh, this could be a try like of the ages.
Yeah, they can see.
And I was like, oh my God. And the French fans just seem to be so up for it. Like I've never been at a game like it. Anyway,
the greatest Six Nations game in history, according to Owen Slot today in the Times. So we're like, oh, this is one of the great games of all time. Certainly one of the best opening halves, 40 minutes. And he does like, that's the best 40 minutes of international rugby I've seen. And it's like, no, this is definitely like as good as you're going to see two teams. Like, I actually think Dupont was man of the match. I've never seen a performance as amazing.
The Hansen tag was absolutely insane.
But that was insane. Everything else he did. Everything else.
The highlight.
He was centrally involved in, like, and he was there for. He might have been running the trail line for that try as well. If it had.
I would have crabbed him regarding the kick, but the more I look at the end, it, like, was the pass necessarily on? Ireland's defence seemed to be very good.
And the other thing is that bounces left instead of right.
Yeah,
like. You know, so we were relatively fortunate in many different ways, including the try. It was never a try. It was fairly obvious in the ground. It wasn't a try. I mean, I think the crowd did their bit. Wayne Barnes kind of backed himself into a corner by saying on-field decision try. It needs to be, massively obvious. And then as soon as the try got scored, the picture emerges. I don't know who controls those pictures, but if this was in France, we would be complaining about the French. So you gotta hold your hands up and say, whatever happened there, that's a failing on the part of the TMO and whoever's providing the pictures, because it was clear his right foot was in touch. And I think
it wasn't at the time, though.
I think it was.
No,
I think there's no. I mean, if you understand how like angles go, what goes up has to have come from somewhere. He can't go. He didn't go straight, so it had to be coming up, and it had to have come off the ground. I thought it was fairly obvious.
Watching on TV, it seemed like there was no way it was a try. I don't know what it felt like in the stadium watching it, but the one thing that I was laughing at, you see afterwards when James Lowe was caught in the big screen and did a face of like, I can't believe that's been allowed, and you could actually hear the crowd laughing from TV. But it was brilliant.
I think he's. I know they say Kiwis and Irish are kind of similar, but Jesus, he must be the most popular Kiwi. Like, more popular than Joe Schmidt. Like, he's just the most likeable fella and epitomises the smile on the face of the players in the squad. I thought, as much as maybe he got fortunate, I thought the ingenuity of his footwork for that try was still amazing, even if we got lucky.
He left the earth.
Yeah,
he left
it's amazing.
It was unbelievable. And that
incredible.
probably goes to show his attitude towards life, which is just kind of go for it, and his reaction afterwards
I'm
to the
fairly
camera.
sure Brian O'Driscoll scored the exact same kind of try that we got away with in the game the year after he scored his hat-trick. would never have been given now, but sure was given. And look, here's the thing, like,
Ireland totally deserved to win that game, regardless of what happened.
Was he tackled? Was it a no-arms tackle? And if it was a no-arms tackle, then it's going to be a penalty try. And if it's a penalty try, then we get the conversion and we actually,
France should have been down to 14. There was a ridiculous late tackle on Johnny Sexton that was missed.
No, it wasn't missed. It wasn't missed. They played penalty advantage for that.
Okay.
And
there we go.
That's what he said. That's what Wayne Barnes said afterwards. You were playing penalty advantage. Although he didn't
nearly,
have his arm
we
up.
nearly scored from it. Yeah.
Well, it was 31 minutes without Sexton. The game was in the balance, and Ireland ended up winning the game by 13 points. Like, that's a really good sign ahead of the World Cup. But were we back here in 2018 talking about the same thing? Heading into 2019, start of the year, being like, this could be it. What's the difference now?
Oh, totally. Well, absolutely. The difference now is that we've won the first 2 games of the Six Nations. England came and physically just said, there's a really easy way to stop you doing what you're doing, and that's to smash you.
Yeah.
And also there was just no strength in depth. Like, we were playing Robbie Henshaw full back in that game. And the style of play had not iterated. We were like, we were really good last year, we're going to do exactly the same thing this year, and we'll move on. And now it seems as if that's not the case at all. So, proper strength and depth. And there you go. Everybody arguing in the comments about Ireland's call instead of celebrating what an amazing victory it was. What's wrong with you people?
So Irish people don't know what to do with themselves. We're just not used to having the best team in the world at any sport. Maybe individual sports we're quite good at throughout the years of boxing and golf, but actually having the best team in the world, undisputably. If you saw the French reaction in the press on Saturday evening and into Sunday, it was like, undoubtedly we lost against the best side of the world. Not just in the rankings.
You're on about going back playing Astro at 34, like that run that Sexton made, and that you're like, what?
I know, yeah,
incredible. 37 years
him
old.
Him and O'Mahony, and actually outstripping the 6 or the 7 from France. You're like,
how good was Doris as well as somebody who's like, who kind of watches rugby like in and out? I thought he was phenomenal. Like, his handling, everything was like.
The pass for the ring rows.
Yeah.
Sorry, the other thing I wanted to talk about was 30 seconds in, spider cam.
Yeah.
You're like,
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I was see the spider cam, like, it rushed back really, it was just embarrassed by what it had done. It kind of rushed back, it's like, I don't want to be seen here.
Show us the angle from above, you cowards. Like, that's what I wanted to see.
To see where the ball hit.
Yeah.
Then you one of those and you jump off the screen like
a bunch of
that
cowards.
That footage must exist somewhere. Because it's the same thing that happened in the NFL game the previous week in the championship game where the Eagles had hit it but with a punt, but they couldn't find footage to prove that it had happened, even though the whole stadium had seen it, and because of that, they couldn't retake it. So I was like, I actually thought he hadn't kicked it well.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did you have a view of it?
Well, we were behind it. I was like, that wasn't a great kick, but actually on the TV when I looked back at it, it looked like it was going to be a good kick, and so therefore. But we get the scrum. You're like, all right, that's okay, that's interesting. And then our scrum holds up. Like, our scrum holding up, that's the first thing. This scrum can't possibly hold up. We're missing all our best scrummagers and our best players. And it's like, well, hang on a second now. I mean, was it Raj saying Ty Furlong doesn't just get the jersey back automatically?
Yeah.
Well, there's a pair at the minute now. Finlay Bealham. Like, if that pop pass had come from Ty Furlong, there would be like, the fanboying would not stop. So Finlay Bealham deserves every single bit of praise that's coming his way.
Yeah, it suggested Bealham's learning off Furlong. And that's what O'Gara was saying yesterday to Joe. He was like, in his own experience as a coach, that he will not want to relinquish that shirt. No chance. Like, it's not like back to you now, Tyke. He said this is going to be seriously competitive.
Yeah.
And you're talking about potentially to have 2 different 15s here in Ireland that are extremely competitive.
Well, that's one of the things that came up in conversation from their time in Portugal. We talked to Quinny about that in just a little while as well. And then was there something else? Tom O'Toole obviously coming on and like blasting through tackles. Like, Tom O'Toole's only 24, so like he's not supposed to be world class just yet. He's got another 3 or 4 years of learning how to scrummage properly. And but if you can have that kind of impact, and we're this far down the depth chart at this point, then maybe he catapults himself up the depth chart a bit, and all of a sudden, like, I think that's the bit that made them so happy afterwards. This wasn't our first team playing really well. This was like, you're looking around who's fit, who's available, and dealing with the problems that they had, and still
there were 2 or 3 tries a better team, I thought, on the day.
Yeah,
really did. Now maybe I was thinking this, like, what will the difference be playing in France? But on that display, Ireland are definitely better than France.
Yeah, you just hope that they didn't peak too soon, but I don't think they did.
I don't think. No,
I do think though that like home advantage matters a huge amount. So when we play France, it'll be in the Stade de France, and there'll be like a tiny pockets of Irish fans.
I think it was interesting that Farrell played that up for the match as well, because like I have been at Six Nations games, and we spoke about this pre-show about like the whole furore about people going for beers. People didn't go for beers Saturday in the game because, as you say, Ger, they didn't want to leave. They didn't want to miss anything.
But how could you, like?
When the game's good, no one goes for beers. That's what happens.
But like I was at Six Nations last year, where there was just such a formality. It was quite dead. There was no real atmosphere there. And in fairness, I mean, I still think rugby is different to football in the sense of the atmosphere. But it was pretty amazing at times on Saturday.
Yeah, and look, it's in such a good moment. Like we sit here Monday morning reflecting on that performance. You're talking about 13 consecutive Test victories at the Aviva, and in the last year, Andy Farrell's side has beaten every major side in the sport. France putting the French victory, putting the bow on that. It's remarkable. And like another thing too, with like Ross Byrne's performance in the last half an hour.
Definitely want to get Quinny on that, because
we'll touch on that with Quinny. And then like, does anything epitomise Sexton's career so much as that sprint to help his team get up the pitch, and then he got clattered and he basically wasn't the same after that and got subbed at the start of the second half. And I'm like, that is Sexton in a nutshell, doing something remarkable, sacrificing himself and inspiring the team to a victory. But it's in a great place at the moment. But it'll be interesting to hear Quinny talk about more
in
detail.
Incredible. It is absolutely incredible. Like Sexton, we should not take for granted just how incredible Sexton is at this stage of his career. Still,
it's unbelievable.
Still driving those standards, still dominating the agenda pre and post match. Like it is completely remarkable that at his age he is still able to do this. The end of Owen Slott's piece, Farrell has strength and depth to take on the world, and he's like, these are amazing, these incredible times. And he lists all the achievements and how great Farrell is, and then obviously talks about our national preoccupation with the quarterfinals, and he's like, yeah, the draw means they will play Scotland and South Africa in their group, and then New Zealand or France in the quarterfinals. So even if they haven't peaked too early, even if they haven't become too reliant on Sexton, even if they haven't finished off, or even if they have finished off with this Grand Slam and are still the number one team in the world, it would actually still be no surprise if they didn't get beyond the quarterfinals.
Yeah, but like, let's enjoy the moment as well.
That's what I'm saying.
This is an unbelievable Six Nations campaign. Scotland are gonna, it's not a formality. That game in Edinburgh is going to be incredible as well.
Yeah. England last at home, potential Grand Slam, the first time to win it at the Aviva.
Good question here from Flying Hellfish 99. Can we do away with silence for kickers? La Marseillaise during the kicks was great.
Yeah.
The French don't care.
Yeah.
None of that silence bollocks.
Amo did not react, didn't even flinch.
Yeah.
And national anthem was blaring out when he was sitting. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Strange they took him off. I know Jalabert came on. And,
I did think because he just landed a kick
flawless
as well.
And he isn't a big fan of Ramo overall, but kicking wise, geez, the guys, it was
both their
exceptional.
wingers I thought were sensational. I thought Ramos was grand, to be honest. But anyway, okay, so that's in the green.
Yeah.
What do you want to do now, Colin? We're in uncharted territory.
We may as well
here.
just keep on going with green and then finish it red in the Welsh rugby. So the other green is Manchester, Johnny, both on the male and female side this weekend. All 4 victories.
Yeah, great week for Man City, obviously. I hope the book is thrown at them, but they seem to rally, and their fans gave it a bit of welly yesterday for the victory over Villa. Man United was a strange one. I watched a good bit of that game, and they were under the cosh, but they're just finding a way of doing it. And Rashford again, I mean, it's phenomenal what he's doing. And
Rashford being a world-class header of the ball is like last 2 weeks new thing.
It's unbelievable.
Could you do that the whole time?
Absolutely. 8 goals in his last 9 games.
Incredible.
This is a Cantona-esque run to the league.
Yeah. He's becoming an elite mentality monster, as Jurgen Klopp once said about his own players. I don't know what Eric Ten Hag has done to that guy, but he is finally fulfilling the world-class potential that he's always had. Last year, like most United fans were quite happy to see the back of Rashford. He flanked the Barcelona and PSG. It's like, yeah, off which you maybe come back in a few years' time, get your head right and become the player that we know you can. He's absolutely phenomenal at the moment, and Ten Hag, reacting to the disappointing 2-2 draw against Leeds during the week with that performance. They weren't, as you said to me yesterday, Johnny, they weren't exceptional United by any means. Leeds were decent, but they got the job done. It's a classic title-winning type performance.
And Man United fans now, like, there's always this lovely feeling of your team wins and you watch Monday Night Football, and Liverpool have now become irrelevant relative to Man United for the time being. Anyway.
Well, they'll never be irrelevant. I know what you mean.
As in, they're not like all of a sudden
not challenging. Yeah,
they're not even. Are they challenging for the top 4?
No, they're nowhere near it.
Probably not at this stage. Yeah, so tonight's going to be fascinating, I think.
But it's been an exceptional weekend for Manchester United overall. In the WSL, they went to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, beat Spurs 2-1, top of the league. So United could be winning one league title at least in WSL. My niece went to her first football game yesterday. She went to this one at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium,
right,
with my sister and husband, and had the full Spurs kit on, and started loudly chanting for United.
Cool.
She liked the red team.
all right, fair enough. You're allowed
She knows
change.
herself. She sees the potential on this side to actually win the league.
There we go.
Typical Man United fan though, living in London, right?
They're trying to make her a Spurs fan. She's not having it. She knows.
Fair enough. Maybe they should have taken her to a game where they were going to win, but a rookie mistake that they can rectify when, I don't know, Villa roll into town or somebody else. I thought the team that Pep picked was interesting. It was basically the Harlem Globetrotters side, and in the middle of the game, the commentary, they're like, "Oh, you can't do this. You can't do this against Arsenal." Bernardo Silva's at left back. It's like, oh, it's funny. It's funny they're missing somebody who, if had been playing in that same position, they would have been like, oh wow, look at Cancelo, look at his positioning, it's so mature and intelligent, what an articulation of his philosophy this is. But because it's Bernardo Silva, they're like, well, it's Saka, he's going to be running up against that, it's not going to work. So we'll see what happens. But I did feel like that was a team picked to go and beat the shit out of Aston Villa in the first half, dominate the game, and then go, yeah, this is us, come on.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe in hindsight, you're saying that like they were.
Oh no, I said it. I said
you
it.
think so?
I saw the team. It was
really?
Like, well, it was 3 at the back and 5, all the world's best forwards. Like,
So I saw a tweet saying like someone tried to find me 4 defenders in this Man City side. He's not having it at all. But don't worry now with Erling Haaland going off injured at half time.
Yeah, I didn't see
in that. It's serious.
They were like hopeful, and it's in the back pages there that he might be out for the game. But I don't know. I mean, look, they'll all go back and go. The post match. The Gundogan post-match interview, Jess Treves was probing a little bit around as much as you can do in those. It was like, oh, Erling, and he played well. I mean, he was making the runs to create space for other players like he's supposed to. Obviously, he scored a load of goals. This was Gundogan in his like slightly clipped Germanic, and you're like, okay, that's interesting. He's captain having a go off Haaland.
Haaland's not been playing that well recent games though, like in fairness.
So he made a goal in the first half, right? And he made some other runs. And Haaland hasn't been playing well. The rest of the team has been playing well. Do you know? And Haaland has scored more goals by Christmas than, most Premier League scorers will score in the whole season. So the criticism of Haaland, whatever is, whose job is it to make him fit in the team? It's everybody's job. But they weren't, there was definitely an undercurrent there. Like, it's up to him.
Well, I was asking Clive Allen on Friday in the kickoff, like, as brilliant as Haaland is, generational talent and all that, it was like, did he pick the wrong club to go to? Because he's going to score goals regardless of where he plays, but he seems.
We were saying this
at
at the start of the season, and it looked like the most ridiculous thing ever.
Can I just ask you though? So he's co-opted Clive Allen's experience, goals.
He loves
name,
Clive Allen,
celebrity. And into his point, Clive Allen roundly dismissed it. just for the record there, for everybody who's watching.
I'm putting it to you.
I could be there of a Monday night, right, just kind of minding my own business, maybe watching like TG Caher or something, and I will get a WhatsApp in of Clive Allen scoring a goal for QPR from Cullum. There's a lot of bromance there.
Well, I mean, I think that happened once, but it was memorable when I did it because it was New Year's. It was New Year's when I did it. But I mean, our latest chat was to do with music.
There we go.
So it could be anything.
There is a little bit of a debate around Haaland now, if that doesn't sound ridiculous, as in at times when you're playing like a kind of a defence that's sitting back a bit and Man City are a bit lethargic and a bit slow in possession, he doesn't really look like he's the amazing player that he is. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Gundogan for me, he's very interesting in interviews. He's actually quite candid. He questioned their hunger, effectively.
Well, there was a skirmish for the penalty. He was going to take the penalty and he had to step in.
Yeah.
And let Mahrez take it. I think Rodri was around the ball, Haaland was around the ball.
Yeah, what's Rodri doing? Like, I've already scored one, I'm going to score again. It's like, but what are you talking about? That's not how this works.
Yeah, Gundogan did well there.
It didn't look like Haaland was like, no, it's his turn. He's in, anyway.
Yeah, all right, we'll move on to Amber.
Yeah. What's an Amber, Johnny? You don't know.
What is an Amber actually? Amber is Arsenal. Again, I didn't see this game, so but we are at that moment where Arsenal is this the sort of the 2-week run where they kind of lose their grip on the Premier League, and it did sound like we had a big kind of VAR debacle for Arteta. I feel a little bit of
Lee Mason forgot to draw the line.
Yeah.
He forgot to draw the line.
Like not draw the line in the sense of like I've had enough here. But
In the
draw an
VAR
actual
room,
line.
he forgot to accurately assess the situation. So Brentford's goal should not have stood, and Arsenal should have won. But now it's great for the league because Man City won, and it's really tight again.
Yeah, although you'd probably nearly want Arsenal to be further. You'd want them to be 5 or 7 clear because you think if Man City win Wednesday.
No, but I think it's great for the match this weekend. Like this week, as you say, only 2 days away. This Wednesday, it's kind of gone under the radar. Arsenal are playing Manchester City, and now it's tantalising after what happened at the weekend.
Big challenge for them now after this run of games. But it does sound like they were a little bit unfortunate. I don't know where I am with VAR. I think it's gone from one extreme to the other of late, where it's missing ridiculous things.
Well, I suggested it goes into the performance rankings. Chant with Ger yesterday, and we were both like,
VAR.
kind of sick of talking about VAR. Like,
here's the thing. It's exactly the same. It's human error, but it's like slightly less egregious.
That's it.
Yeah.
I put the flag up. I didn't put the flag up. It's the same thing.
It'll
get better.
I think that's exactly it. It is human error. It's still a human being making the decision.
Yeah.
VAR is just assisting.
Now,
literally assisting.
Yeah, I don't know if you're following the evolution of AI, but we're over the weekend. Everybody's like, the evolution of AI has been linear for decades, and then all of a sudden it has stopped being, and now it's become exponential, and now it's reaching a point where it's hyper exponential. So I guess within the next 18 months is that there'll be no human involved in any of the decision making in this. That they'll just be like, we'll know immediately when a ball is kicked.
They do it in tennis, and they take the challenges away now, so players have 3 challenges remaining. But instead, it's literally like it will tell you, the system will tell you whether it's in or out, and you just get on with the game quickly. And that's exactly where football should get to. Brentford, though, unbeaten in 10 in the Premier League.
Amazing.
Brentford are really good.
They're incredible. They're just the second side to take points off Arsenal at the Emirates this season. Newcastle were the other. Overall, though, Arsenal could have been in the red. WSL, they lost to Manchester City 2-1. Katie McCabe on the bench again, came on. So it's very, very dark amber. They could have gone to red here, Arsenal. They just squeaked it because they didn't lose against Brentford.
The big news of the weekend, obviously. So we're going to get to the red. Evan Ferguson came off the bench, just so you're all.
Yeah, 57th minute, yeah.
That's okay. They were also pretty good. And sorry, we should have.
That was a concern.
And they had another VAR disallowed goal there.
We should have put Chris Hughton in the green. He's got the gig in Ghana full time. It looked like they were heading that direction. So we wish them all the very best. What else we got in red?
Red, we have, we can start here with Nathan Jones.
It's all Welsh, all red.
Yeah. Very Welsh team. Nathan Jones, 94 days in the job in a 3.5-year contract. Last 7 of his 8 Premier League games in charge. Last 9 of his 14 games overall. They did beat Manchester City in the League Cup in the quarter-final to reach the semi-final of the League Cup under Nathan Jones. And he got the job in November, so he would have had a significant impact in the League Cup. So there was that. But once those comments aired after the Brentford defeat last weekend, where he says, I've had to compromise my beliefs in order to progress.
Well, he was also bigging himself up as one of the best managers statistically. And you're like, well, if some of the board is trying to back you here, sometimes I wonder, do players sort of not necessarily take to a manager at a particular club? Because he's obviously been so good at Luton, where he'd obviously lost the plot of late, and the game was up. And I think, in fairness to the board, they were like trying to give him a chance. But you can't be gambling on your Premier League future with the money involved.
No, he was referencing his 2 spells with Luton Town, and he's saying pound for pound we had the best statistics in the Championship. Sky Sports looked into it, published those stats, and that was not the case.
Then you're done, kind of. Yeah,
done. Yeah,
and of course, Lamson, Gerrard, and the likes being referenced as potential. I mean, it'd be good fun if it were to happen. I'd say Jesse Marsh might get it.
Jesse Marsh heavily linked this morning. Yeah. Southampton a big fan of his high pressing style. Now Leeds players weren't, but maybe Southampton fans will be.
All right, Welsh Rugby in the red, obviously. New lows week on week. We thought that, like, we'd expose them somehow, and that the team that they picked this week would be a backlash, but no sign of the backlash.
How much of this is Wales being shite, or Scotland being actually quite good?
I think we need to be very, very wary of Scotland. Finn Russell, Finn Russell seems to be all in.
Has there ever been a better display of kicking to find a winger? Like, some of his kicks were just so on the button. Now, I'm also wondering, are Wales that bad? They looked so bad in so many aspects.
It was a maverick anyway, regardless of Wales.
Like that pass.
He's had a baby. That seems to have settled him down. His partner's moved to Paris, and so fully tuned in. Finn Russell faces Ireland in the World Cup. Stands between us and a place in the quarterfinals.
about the Six Nations. I mean,
and the Six Nations.
They play us in the Six Nations. This is the big game in the group. Like, forget about the World Cup for a
like
moment.
losing to this Ireland and Scotland side is no shame, but the manner of both defeats have been alarming. Do you think Warren Gatland's like, I shouldn't have, could never go back? Do you think he's regretting it? Do you, Gatland?
No, I don't think so. I think that this is like a really difficult start like this gives you the opportunity to go in and completely revolutionise whatever it is that you need to do. And he clearly loves Welsh rugby. He's obviously very suited to the temperament there. And, you know, there'll be a crowd of kids coming through between now and the next World Cup. And he's got a contract that takes him up to at least halfway, but with the option to go the whole way. So, anyway, right, that's this week's. Anything else?
That is this week's
Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
It's 5 minutes past 8. If you want to get in touch this morning, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, or of course you can always get in touch by leaving a comment on the YouTube stream. Alan Quinlan is standing by. We're going to talk rugby next.
It's this year the water's been muddied. Like, and you know, starting with the Keane Healy one, it's red and then it's rescinded, and there were a couple around that time, and I feel like the referees are using more interpretation now, and it was a bit more zero tolerance maybe last season. I kind of think, well, if you'd stuck with the zero tolerance, you might have encouraged a change of behaviour, you know, this year. But now you've gone and said, actually, well, maybe you can get away with a few more than you might have previously. So I think they've actually created a tricky situation for themselves.
I think you're on the money there. There was definitely last year in particular, you know, teams were going down to 13 men and it was just literally straight red card. There's connection to the head. That's the end of it. Yeah. That's clear and that's concise and we know that. Obviously, you know, they've taken maybe some stick or some pressure from the fans saying that, you know, oh God, like rugby's gone so this way, so soft, whatever people are saying, and now they're trying to look at that level of danger. But I think it's very, very hard for someone, especially Wayne Barnes. I think in particular, the TMO is different. He can see that over and over again before he even shows it to Wayne Barnes. So you know what I mean? Yeah. But I think for the referee to make that decision, it's very, very hard on him. So I agree with you. I think the total behaviour after a season or 2 seasons, and teams were going down to 13, 12 men, you definitely start to change your behaviour then, and there's pressure on the coach and staff, whereas it's after taking a step back now, and as you said, they're getting away with a couple, they're off for 10 minutes and it's back on. So they either need to go one way or the other, I think, with this.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. The Coigig Pod on OTB Sports.
Who's going to start the Katie McKay brand? Is it going to be me or you, Emma? He knew he messed up the minute the whistle went, because he went straight up to Katie, and I don't know what he said to her, but I was like, come on, like, you're going up there to her to basically say, I don't know if he said, I should have started you. I don't think he said that, but he should be saying that.
Keep up to date with all the WSL action every Tuesday and subscribe to the feed in the OTB Sports app now. OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
It is a Victory Monday, 8 minutes past 8. Alan Quinlan is here. Alan, how are you?
Morning, lads. Yeah, good, thanks.
The greatest Six Nations game of all time?
So some people are saying. I wasn't there. I was in Murrayfield, so I was watching as well as many others. Yeah, I think it was an unbelievable game, wasn't it? Frantic, great skill, great pace, tempo to the game. 2 best teams in the world, and sometimes we've spoken about the label of one, and you know where you're ranked. Sometimes it's justified, and sometimes you're kind of a little bit.
Yeah.
But Ireland deserve the credit now, and I think we're all going to be still a little bit sceptical, not get too far ahead. But on the balance of what we've seen, not just in that game, I go back to New Zealand, and even the previous November where they beat Japan, New Zealand, Argentina, the performances there. Andy Farrell has done an incredible job.
There's a couple of things, right? We shouldn't get carried away, but actually the joy of sport is trying to feel alive, and we should get a little bit carried away, because this is about as good as it gets.
Yeah, you have to enjoy it, and ultimately we all keep saying we're going to be judged at the World Cup, and you could do brilliantly now, and you come unstuck at the World Cup. You just saw what happened in the Soccer World Cup, the way people are devastated and upset when it happens, when you're knocked out and you're a fancied team. Ireland are going to be fancied at the World Cup now. A lot of English journalists and people online actually really given Ireland massive credit for the way they're playing, the system, the composure, the fitness levels, the skill levels, all that kind of stuff. You go back 2 years ago, but this team was getting questioned. They lost their opening fixture in 2021 to Wales and then to France. It was blunt against Italy a little bit. Won in Scotland with that late penalty from Johnny Sexton, 27-24, I think. And then the performance against England was the one that kind of kick-started the attack progression. And, we'd heard a lot of players say, well, we're working hard on attack and we believe in the system, and Mike Catt was under pressure. So, coaches and players always have dips and low points and times where you have to dig in. And I think the progression of this team has been nothing short of phenomenal, really. The way
that's the key thing for me is that Johnny was asking earlier on, like, what's the difference between this time, or maybe it was Colin, what's the difference between this time and 4 years ago? And the difference is that our game is improving. The players are getting better. It's not like we've discovered a thing that works and we're going to get really good at that and we're going to just focus on that. So when the game was kind of in balance, we decided to start kicking for the corners and turn them around, which, we're not just one thing.
And I think for me, the thing, Ger, is I felt even when France were putting on that pressure and got that try in the first half from Penot, it was a wonderful try. I genuinely felt Ireland would go up the field and score again. You just get that feeling about this team that even if someone attacks them back, and historically, you're hanging on and in a big game and you're nervous, God, what will the All Blacks do and what will England do or South Africa against you? Now you just feel that these guys have a level of composure and control and belief in themselves, and that has to come from the boss. Andy Farrell has done a remarkable job here. I think their biggest strength with respect to the players is collectively they're all at just a high level of diligence in what they're doing, fitness level, skill level. We don't have X-factor geniuses who can run out over people and just do something out of nothing and something special in the game. But they're all at such a high level. And there's probably 8 or 10 of this team, if you were picking a World 15, even before the weekend, that you'd say would be in the conversation because their form has been so good with Ireland.
We obviously have X factor in the forwards, though, where you're like, are these lads like top?
They're not the biggest players in the world, Johnny. They're not like, they're not an Ebenezer for South Africa, who's just freakishly big. But they're absolutely excellent players. James Ryan is back playing superbly. What Finlay Bealham has done
I think
the last
Finlay
2
Bealham
weeks.
is a really interesting case study where we were all very concerned about what would happen. Tadhg Furlong is one of the unmissables. If Tadhg Furlong goes down, what are we going to do? If James Gibson-Park goes down, what are we going to do? If Sexton goes down, what are we going to do? Now it's like if Hugo Keenan goes down, okay, fair enough. I'm not sure what we're going to do. But like all of those did go
Matt
down.
Henson probably goes in full back. That's it. And I think you just from Andy Farrell, I think he's really interesting to listen to. And if you're at one of these press conferences, I remember being at the press conference in Dunedin. I don't know if I've said this to you. Second test, they've just been beaten well in Auckland. Glass half full for them because and really when I watched the game back, that first test in Auckland, there was lots of opportunities and there was certain things that just didn't go Ireland's way. They believed it, and I felt straight after the game they were all saying, well, if this happened and we need to do X, Y and Z for next week, and we think if we get that right, and it's just one of those days that things didn't go right. And he was at the press conference in Dunedin on the Thursday, and he was literally telling the journalists there that this is what I love. I loved what's happening. I love the challenge. I love the fact that our backs are to the wall and that mentally we're going to be really tested again in a bit of a cauldron down in Dunedin. And I just found it intriguing to think that he believed that mentally they were in the right place and this was a real challenge, and it was one that he would embrace as a player himself, because that's the way he played. At 17 he's playing for Great Britain, Rugby League. Unbelievable player, mental strength. And I just sensed that he was sitting at the top table saying...
Never seems to be about him either.
I'd love to be going out onto the field to play the All Blacks in a second test here. and that's what I want my players to feel, and I want them to be tested and stressed mentally and physically. It's not about him, Johnny. You're right.
Yeah,
and he's a lovely mood. But look, it's they're in a good place at the moment, and the coach has created that environment.
A couple of things about that too, because I just want to delve into that. In Portugal, apparently, I can't remember where I read this today, but there was a game where they played 15 on 15 and they tore lumps out of each other, and afterwards, apparently, Sexton said, "Jesus, it's very hard to tell which is the first team here." And like we heard this about Kilkenny when they were at their absolute peak, that they'd have 2 15s to win the All-Ireland. And then we heard the same about the Dubs. The hardest game they're getting is in but like all the great teams feel that. Whether or not it's true, if they believe that, it creates this incredible sense of power.
The reality is everybody out there knows 10, 12, 13 of those players that are going to start. But the point he's making is a really interesting one, that the level of the guys behind is increasing, the way they're training, the way they're challenging the so-called first team when they get a chance to run at them, that they're not kind of accepting a tackle and saying, well, look, this is the way it should be. They're actually getting stuck in and they're actually attacking them. So Andy Farrell has capped 30 players since he's taken over, which is a big number in a World Cup cycle. Now, given, you had Japan and USA in 2021 fixtures. Last year they were in New Zealand. So there was no tour in 2020 because of COVID.
Yeah.
They were supposed to go to Australia. So he's capped 30 players. Selected 66 before the start of the Six Nations. So last week and this week, I don't know, would there be a few more? I don't think so. But it's up over. The numbers are very high. So you still get a lot of familiar faces that we can pick. But if you look back to 2019 and the loss to New Zealand, there's 8 or 9 different players on the starting team. So he's done a really good job in turning that around. Simon Easterby, Paul O'Connell, John Fogarty, deserve massive credit. Mike Catt as well. So we're not getting to a point here that we've the World Cup won. Ultimately, and we keep saying it, if you get out of the group, Scotland are going to be a problem in that group. You're playing France or New Zealand in a quarter-final. They could still be beaten on their day there, but they're in a good place, so we might as well enjoy it now and give them credit.
Just the fitness thing you mentioned, like how noticeable is that? Because like our last try, the French lads are almost falling into each other. I think they're getting tired.
Yeah.
And like you look at James Ryan's hit, I think it was like near the goal line, this massive hit like late in the game.
It's the hunger, Johnny, and
like Doris said, the first half was one of the toughest first halves he's ever endured. Yeah. Yet second half we're finishing like we were dominant in the second half. Really,
we've been focused on the figures. The piece we do with Derek McNamara, and there'll be another one tomorrow about the length of time that the ball is in play and how World Rugby's rules have shifted, and they've actually shifted in our favour, that the game is trying to speed up, trying to have more ball
so
to
the
play
game
time.
they want to play, opposition can't slow it down. Now if you're leading a game and you're trying to manage a score in bad weather, it'd be nice to have a little huddle before the line out. And a few times Wayne Barnes and even the other games of the weekend, which is great, teams walking slowly into line outs, having a little bit of a chat. They're being told get in quickly. So the game is speedy. They're trying to make it quicker, which is important to what Ireland are doing. I like the fact that they kicked a lot as well.
So many kicks in the game.
It's unbelievable. If I gave you the stats now when you didn't hear the result and said, well, Ireland kicked the ball 39 times, France kicked it 37 times, you'd be like, Borefest. But it's the type of kicking. It wasn't thumping it out the touch. They were tactically kicking at times, crossfield kicks. And a really important part of the performance of the weekend was that Ireland didn't run back at France. They actually, it is a little bit boring when it's gone on for a minute or two, but France want to play in your half. They want to smother you, overpower you, kick the ball long, hope that you run back. And it's the length of kicks from Intimac and Dupont. They're going for distance, and they want you to run back and do something silly and get turned over, kick a penalty, a goal, or kick it into the corner.
Yeah.
And then when they're in that strike zone, they have X-factor players. They have power. They have steppers. Dupont is the best rugby player in the world by a country mile. He's just phenomenal. If you take him out of that France team, they need to wrap him in cotton wool for the World Cup. And the other thing is, France are going to learn a lot from that defeat. So, number one, Galtier and Sean Edwards, maybe fitness, maybe the way they played. They threw a bit of caution to the wind early on in that first half, so you would say they maybe added to their own downfall a little bit. Territorially, they're normally on top. So Ireland won the 64% territory and 54% possession.
Do you think they regret taking 3 points earlier when they would have been able to kick for the corner and get their maul going?
I think if they look back on it, yes. But I think they were giving Ireland respect. There's no guarantee you'll score that maul now, because Ireland have become incredibly good at defending mauls, and that's down to Paul O'Connell.
How long has that taken, actually?
It's probably it takes time. Sometimes we saw it in November, so we've evidence of it in November when South Africa are trying to maul Ireland. I think South Africa had 20-something phases, remember, in that early on in that game, and Ireland were under a lot of pressure, but they held their line, they defended them all. So they become really efficient. The other crazy stat in the game is Ireland missed 38 tackles. So again, it's another stat if I presented you this morning and you said, well, one team missed 38 tackles here, you'd say, well, they probably lost the game. A lot of it was just incredible evasion. Like, I was doing looking back at certain aspects of good defence from Ireland, and in certain parts of that good defence, there was 2 missed tackles in this phase, 3 missed tackles here. It was guys just falling off the hips, another guy trying to scramble, and then the third guy would make him. It wasn't massive ground that France had made. But the stats were crazy in the game, and it was a phenomenal game, just to see what pundits and journalists are saying about it. So we have to celebrate it and say, look, they're in a really good place.
Yeah, we should enjoy this.
It'd be a great yardstick for to beat us with if we go out in the quarter-final, which ultimately is a flick of a coin, really, no matter what kind of form you're in going into that World Cup. You play France at home in a World Cup quarter-final, it's going to be phenomenally difficult.
The French fans, like, for me, that was an amazing aspect of it. Sexton said before the game, I grew up like watching Ireland generally lose to France. The French fans, they gave this impression like, we're up for this, but we're underdogs here. Like, we need to get behind this team. And the atmosphere was unbelievable. It was absolutely unbelievable.
In the last kind of 10 or 15 years, the results in Dublin have been really good against France. And we've gone to Paris a good few times and won. But the French fans at the weekend, and they really feel that this is a new era for them, winning the Grand Slam last year. The coaching team, they've an incredibly high number of players they can select from in the top 14, so their depth chart is, and they're missing a couple of players as well. They're missing Jonathan Dante at centre, Waukee and Villiers. They're probably 3 that start from. Ireland have an argument there's no argument, there's 4 that will definitely start. Furlong, Sheehan, Gibson Park and Robbie Henshaw. They're 4 starters.
In the World Cup, we're actually, by the time we get to a quarter-final, if we make it there, there's no chance of us having everybody available, because that's just how it works.
And that's the word he used, stressed, doesn't he? Ireland have been stressed in the first 2 fixtures, and that's what he wants. He's planning for that. Go back to 2015 against Argentina, when you had no Paul O'Connell, Sean O'Brien, Tommy Bowe, Johnny Sexton and Peter O'Mahony for Argentina. All gone after the France game. Brilliant win against France. You have you're top the group. You're playing France or Argentina the week after. There's 5 of them gone, and it affected the mentality of the team. And I think obviously it was a very good Argentinian side, but there was changes in personnel, positional changes in that game, and it messed. It took away that opportunity. So even from a mental point of view, Ger, any good team, if 3 of your top players are out, everyone drops the heads. I've been there before on teams where we've been missing certain players, and you're kind of going, God, he's an awful loss, and it's the undertone is they're a loss. Whereas now, ideally, you want to get to a point where, okay, and I think the biggest plus for Ireland that Saturday was Ross Byrne's performances when Johnny Sexton went off. He went off early in that second half.
Yeah.
And there was no kind of hairy...
49 minutes gone, I think.
There was no kind of situation where we went, oh God, wish Sexton was on. Sexton is at a different level, but I just think Ross Byrne has...
Our attacking play didn't
He's now got
an
incredible surge of confidence.
Yeah.
And he feels, this is my chance and this is my moment in time, which is really good.
Let's talk briefly then about... So afterwards, Farrell says, of the 23 players, only 10 of them were available to go to commercial, which I think is what happens afterwards.
They go up into corporate boxes and stuff like that, which is part of the gig, and they have to do it.
Yeah, so 13 of them were unavailable because of knocks. Okay, so clearly it was... strewn all around the place, and we wait to see what the story is with Tadhg Beirne. I think he's gone first.
Of the 13 that were unavailable, there's about 5 or 6 of them who who lean on a bit of a knock or a bruise, which is very shrewd. I'd probably be one of them as well. But so there's about 6 or 7 that can't go, and then there's about 6 or 7 who are bluffing it a little bit. And, the physio or the doctor's not going to get. No, I'm only joking.
But of those, right, obviously, Tadhg is the most serious, and we really hope that there's nothing too long term. Like, if he misses the rest of the Six Nations but is grand for the summer, like the World Cup, from Tadhg's perspective, I think, is all that matters, right? From Ireland's perspective.
What about Munster? Like, well, poor Munster fellas, yeah.
You're going to have RG Snyman back.
Maybe, yeah. No, look, his injury looked. We don't have an update. Maybe there'll be an update today. He went for a scan yesterday, I think, and it didn't look great. But there would be a lot of bruised and battered bodies after that.
Do you take this now as an opportunity? So Robbie Henshaw is back training with the group, and as far as we know, because he did a piece with us, it was always the Italy game was his. So you stick Robbie Henshaw back in the team. Do you start Bundy? Do you give Ringrose a week off? Do you give?
Well, he's a week off this weekend.
But like
the natural inclination here is to think we make 10, 12 changes, and
or it's not. Maybe it's 4. Maybe it's 4 changes.
It's 4 or 5 changes at max, and you load the bench a bit. There's certain guys that you would like to see, give him a little bit of a look. And Gavin Coombs, we know Ryan Baird has played. He's a couple of caps, and he's an incredible player. He needs to probably come into the mix. Bundy Aki probably needs game time. Whether he goes back with Connacht and plays in the URC this weekend, I don't know. But Joe McCarthy. There's a couple of them there that you could argue need a shot at it, or need to be on the bench anyway, and get a mix, feel part of this.
But what changes are you making for the Italy game then?
I don't know. I think Ryan Baird will come in. Gavin Coombs should come into the mix
to start, or Coombs on the bench, Baird to start.
To
give Caelan Doris a week off.
Yeah, I don't know, because like for me as a player, if I'm playing starting on the Irish team now, my weekend off is next weekend. Right. I'm getting a break. Do you want, if they don't play there, effectively some of them don't play for 3 or 4 weeks, for nearly 4 weeks. So they'll be chomping at the bit to be involved and to play, and so there's probably 3 or 4 changes. I think Ryan Baird, if Tadhg, and you just assume Tadhg is going to be out of that picture, he may be back. If it's not too bad, he might be back for the Scotland game. Who knows? But Ryan Baird and Gavin Coombs are the 2 come to mind. Maybe start Kilcoyne. Andrew Porter is going hard for a fair part of the season as well. So, and Bundy Aki's the other one. Jamie Osborne, does he come into the picture and get a run, get a start? Maybe it could happen. But you want to respect Italy and not make wholesale changes.
So Ross Byrne starts?
Again, Sexton is a weekend off next weekend, you know what I mean? So it depends on what the injury's like. So it's possibly Ross Byrne as well. So I don't know what they're thinking, and they'll give us the logic when they kind of pick it. But you would think 4 or 5 changes, and you've got to keep it strong enough, though. You can't make 8 or 9 changes and suddenly think it's going to happen, because it's not that the players underneath wouldn't perform, but it's just that cohesion that's very strong at the moment. Rob Herring situation, not sure what's going to happen with him, and will Dan Sheehan come back? But that tackle on Saturday, there's no point in us going into it in depth. Everybody's had their opinion. It should have been a red card, and
do you know, for me, it wasn't much the tackling. Clearly, it was a red card. The most horrifying aspect of that game for me was the fact that he took that hit. I was very close to it, and I was like, Jesus Christ! I was like, oh my God! Like, to see a hit like that. He got himself up, and he picked up the ball very shortly afterwards, and he's like,
tried to pass
all over the shop. And he was. I was like, how is a situation where this fella is basically has to play on, and he's seen to be playing on when I don't know what's going through like his body or head at that moment. And I thought that was horrible to see, because God knows where he was.
There's a lot of people have a strong opinion on that, saying when you get a head knock straight off. So I've been a big advocate for this. To be fair, people can accuse me of not being very pro the protection of the players. The issue you have there, Johnny, is sometimes it can seem worse than what it is, and I mean that respectfully. the initial hit, you're not really sure. It's a big collision. What's the effect of the impact? Obviously, when he tries to pick up the ball, he's kind of stumbling a bit, and then that's the point where you go, wow, you need to get this player off. There's a delay in him actually leaving the field. And with respect to the process, the independent match doctor at that point is now looking at footage. So we had a problem with that in Australia with the Nick White thing, where the footage was, he was looking at one shot when Nick White got a second bang off the line out. So there is an issue there and needs to be spoke about, and World Rugby came out and spoke about that process. In the situation on Saturday, the independent match doctor is looking at footage. He needs to look at footage. You can't just pull a player off the field if it looks like that he's had a knock. We need to see some of the evidence of the imbalance and all that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of a delay there, and in their defence, they're looking at footage there, and then obviously when they see the footage, he's off.
Should the play just stop? when something like that happens, should they just stop the play?
There's an argument to say yes. Yeah, there's an argument to say yes. There's an argument to say yes.
Anyone watching that, as much as I didn't need a replay to know, like, he was in a bad way after that, he had to be.
Yeah.
I guess the reason that they don't stop play immediately is because you can then start having people faking that type of situation.
That's the situation that can happen.
And
so we brought in,
that same play, which is horrific to think that somebody might be risking long-term brain injury for the sake of gameplay. But I guess the one counter argument to the footage is, right, Wayne Barnes goes, there's a whiplash. Now, that seemed, the whiplash, he used the word whiplash when he's talking to the whiplash seemed to be a factor which was diminishing so it looks worse than it is, but actually, like, if you think there's a bit of whiplash, then there's a potential suspected
concussion. And the words
concussion.
we used as there wasn't a high level of danger.
Didn't make any sense. It just he seemed to back himself into a corner with that, and also with the on-field decision to try. So you have to be absolutely certain that his foot's touched the ground, which is
James Lowe's try.
Definitely wasn't a try.
No, his foot touched the ground.
Yeah. Was it a no arms tackle?
His arm is tucked fairly tight. Now, you think he might be trying to target the ball at that situation, but his arm's got to be up here. He's got to dip, Antonio. So he knew it straight away. He's very much.
Sorry, you were talking about the
for the try, James Law's try. Yes, Pinot doesn't use his arms.
Is there any argument then that that's actually it's a penalty try?
It balances itself out. Yes, possibly. He doesn't try to tackle James Lowe with a wrapped arm. He's trying to get his two hands are trying to go through where the ball is.
Apart from the massive two egregious errors that Wayne Barnes made, otherwise he refereed.
He did, yeah. He really did. Yeah. Look, it's in fairness, there was some tempo to the game. It was unbelievable. Ireland very fortunate with the James Lowe one. Antonio should have been red, and in a sense, maybe it's better it didn't happen from would we been saying, well, against 14 men, and it worked out fine that way. But Rob Herring's injury and the knock he took was of high impact, and it was dangerous, and there was
obviously dangerous. And
you look at Matthew Carley's face when he's going yellow. He's like,
yeah. Wayne Barnes on the ref link was like, I'm taking the assist for that after the try got scored, because he had to duck out of the way inside the French 22, which I thought was quite funny. But I thought, like, apart from that, as I say, massive errors.
He did. He's a brilliant referee. And look,
is this, like, just a quick question, is this the best French team that there has been?
We'll see.
Yeah,
and Ireland beat them fairly comfortably. Like,
we did beat them comfortably. That's the thing.
They did beat them comfortably. Regardless of decisions, they
France
did beat
played
them
well.
Yeah, Ireland
scored 3 tries. They were held up 4 times over the line.
Yeah.
So that's
like held up 3 or 4 times when it looked certain to score.
That's the reality of it, and looked fairly comfortable. I think France tactically would do things a bit different. Yeah. Would we won that game in France?
We weren't getting
possibly.
We weren't getting that try. They're finding that angle straight away.
7 or 8 decisions in the game last year that Ireland lost went against Ireland. So France will have their video footage today, and they'll be going back to the referee saying, well, this and this should have been different. So
how good are Scotland? Greg Mallon says the Ireland pack will destroy the Scottish pack. Scottish backs won't do anything without the ball bar defend. I don't know if their pack is going to be destroyed by anybody.
No, they're not going to be destroyed. They're very competitive. I think they've got a little bit of edge about them now. Richie Gray and Gilchrist, a problem area from, even though they've been there a while, and Richie Gray's been out of the setup, come back in. They're playing well from really good back row. Crosby, Fagerson, and Richie. They're
depth
dogs, like,
and experience now.
Yeah, it's again if and Finn Russell was really good in that second half. They've some Hugh Jones is a really good player in the centre, so they feel good about themselves. Consistency's always been a problem for them. That's the first time since the early mid-90s since they won 2 games at home or 2 games in a row in the Six Nations. So they'll be a serious threat for Ireland. There's no doubt about that. Wales are really poor. Pardon?
Bigger threat than England, Scotland away.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think so. There's no doubt about that. They were very good in the second half. Wales were poor. They look in big trouble, and it was a poor first half, poorly executed by both sides. But Scotland, better team by a mile.
Wales are flaky enough that if they'd scored that try at the end of the first half,
yeah,
then
they're right back in the game.
You know,
and
but they're so flaky that because they didn't, it's like, oh, that's it, it's game over.
They look like they've just got to go way back and just start all over again, find a game plan, execute their attack better. It's hard to say they're badly coached, but they just looked so blunt in attack and not really sure what to do. So they've a lot of work to do, and probably the team that Warren Gatland picked on Saturday should have been the team he picked against Ireland.
Yeah,
and there'd be less pressure. They've Shunza, the back row, was probably one bright spark for him. They've Tommy Raffel in there, Jack Morgan, young players, Daffy Jenkins in the second row. So they've 5 or 6 20, 21, 22-year-olds, and he's got to change it up. And they left out all that experience and dropped Alan Wynne-Jones, Tipperick, Falatau. So
they have a nice handy World Cup draw though, so they can still.
They're
be
on the right side, yeah. You can imagine they'll still be thereabouts. He'll probably muster a team together and get some of these players believing in themselves. They're good players, but they have a lot of work to do.
So in short, we're going to win the World Cup. Get on board the hype train.
You said it, not me, Ger. No, I don't think so. It's a long way off, and no matter what happens between now and then, it's still going to be incredibly difficult.
This is as good as it's ever been.
Yeah, here and now they're brilliant, and they're playing brilliantly, and I think it's not just.
It does feel a bit different as well, doesn't it?
Even sometimes you feel that if you meet English and Welsh people and French people and say, "Oh, Ireland, great, they'll win the Six Nations," that you're going, "Yeah, right." You really mean that now? You're just being nice, but I met Sam Warburton the other day and Yannick Nyanga, and they're like, this Irish team is incredibly good. They're really taking notice of what they're doing, and you can analyse them all you want, and there's certainly areas. The obvious ones will we go after Ireland physically, slow their breakdown. They're the very obvious ones. The same with Leinster, but analysing what they're doing and knowing it and seeing it, it's still very, very hard to stop them because they're just non-stop in how they're doing it, and their execution is really good.
Just a word about Conor Murray and his performance. His performance levels are at the very highest levels they've ever been in his entire career, and an incredibly difficult week for him as well.
Yeah, it was a really difficult week, and his father's a lovely man, and it was very unfortunate, and we hope he recovers and send him our best wishes. My mother said to me last week, "Oh God, Jerry Murray was so lovely when we have any of the parents get-togethers. He always brings me out dancing, and he's so nice to me." And it's funny when you hear those kind of things and the way the parents all kind of have that connection. But yeah, it's a really tough week to have that sort of distraction and to go out and play then. And I know if it was my dad or if it was in that situation, they'd want you to play. And I'm sure Conor based his decision to be involved on Dad would want me to play. So, but it's still a hard thing to deal with, a very difficult thing. And he played really well, and I think the week before in Wales, and it's a nice period for him now, given a couple of weeks previous he wasn't in the 23 for Northampton for Munster. So
it's incredible.
What did you make of Sexton?
His attitude has been really good, though. I think his attitude, and that's the key to it.
What did you make of Sexton just during the anthems? I was blown away by it at the time. It was like he was.
It was specifically Ireland's call, wasn't it?
Totally, yeah. The Ireland's call. He was just totally emotional.
I know. He's loving being putting on the jersey, and that hunger and drive is just gone to a level that it's
he was looking around. He was looking around during that, and it did have the feel of like this could be my second last or my last time here, and hopefully there's a Heineken Cup final. But maybe Ross Byrne will be in ahead of him. Who knows? Right, we've gone a bit over, but sure, why not? Because Ireland are the best team in the world. Quinny, good stuff.
Cheers, lads.
Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of Off the Ball. Braeburn Coffee is coming to an Applegreen store near you, with new Braeburn locations popping up every month. Visit applegreenstores.com/Braeburn to find your nearest Braeburn Coffee experience. Here's Dion Fanning and Hugh Farrelly on the Sunday pay-per-view. We're back with Colin Mullaney in the news after this.
It was incredibly compelling, and David Kelly in the Sindo was probably the most poetic. He said, wherever one looked, from the elusive Dupont to the effortless Keenan, from the irrepressible Fiku to the dazzling Penno, wonder stole the heart. Which is, nice cadence and all that. But now, we've been here before, and the haters, there's enough of them out there in rugby, and they'll say, we're getting ahead of ourselves again. And, you can see where they're coming from. But the quality of this performance, it's like, how long am I watching rugby now? 40 years. It's the best coach team I've ever seen in an Ireland green jersey. They just look utterly in control of what they're doing. And it's you can see why. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the Aviva Stadium and people going out for pints and all that. That didn't seem to be a factor yesterday. That's an atmosphere. No, I wasn't there. I was working, but it seemed to be all in it together. And the natural progression, as Rory Keane says in the Mail, all aboard the hype train. Next stop Paris. We have to think about the World Cup. And if you were to introduce a caveat, what would concern me slightly is that injury seems to be our best selector at the moment. We're finding out things about Ross Byrne, Jack Crowley, Finlay Bealham because of injury, whereas you wonder, would they be better off getting ahead of it? Most people seem to be of the opinion that we go after having read all the papers, we focus on the Grand Slam now and go that way. But there's still question marks over this team. For example, Hugo Keenan, if he gets injured, what's our plan B? Gary Ringrose, these kind of questions, which I wouldn't mind seeing answered over the remainder of the championship.
It's 8:41. You're watching OTB AM. You can leave a comment in the YouTube stream. You can get us 0879 180 180 on WhatsApp, or of course you can tweet us at Off the Ball AM. Colin Mullaney is with us. Colin, good morning to you.
Ger and Johnny, how are things?
Very good. What's going on? Where are we starting?
Well, last night, I don't know, you stayed up for the Super Bowl?
I didn't.
Oh, no?
I got up and watched the highlights this morning.
Okay.
Yeah, can't do that anymore.
But it sounded like a cracking game, I have to say. I'm not a huge NFL fan, but Andy Reid saying that Patrick Mahomes will become an American football legend. That's after inspiring his side to victory in last night's match, coming from 10 points down at half-time to beat the Philadelphia Eagles by 38 points to 35 in Arizona. Mahomes struggling with that ankle injury as well. And speaking of injuries, Erling Haaland with a leg injury, but Pep Guardiola saying that he's hopeful it's not too serious and that he can play against Arsenal midweek. That's after City's 3-1 win over Aston Villa in the Premier League yesterday. And elsewhere, Manchester United 2-0 winners over Leeds. Merseyside derby tonight, which has slightly gone under the radar given the form of both teams, I think it's fair to say. But that one kicks off at Anfield between Liverpool and Everton at 8 o'clock. In the WSL yesterday, Leicester picking up just their second win of the season. They beat Liverpool 1-0. Manchester United back to the top after a 2-1 win over Spurs, and Aston Villa enjoyed a 6-2 win against Brighton. A busy weekend of hurling action in Gaelic Games. Tipperary with a significant win in Nolan Park yesterday, first there since 2008 over Kilkenny. They were 224 to 121 winners in Division 1 of the league. Cork's good start to the new season continued. 5 points winners over Galway at Pearse Stadium. Dublin beat Antrim, who fought back late on, but Dublin winning by 3 in the end at Parnell Park in Wexford. 223 to 115 winners over Westmeath.
You were at the Dublin game.
I was covering the Dublin game. Antrim came back very well actually in the second half. Just chatting to Sarah outside about it. Antrim had a couple of good goal chances. Neil McManus hit the crossbar, also a good save from Eddie Gibbons in the second half as well. I think Antrim will be disappointed that they haven't taken anything from their first two matches. They pushed Kilkenny fairly close in Corrigan Park last
It's great to see how competitive they are. Like, I think hurling really needs this, and I watched some of the game, and I mean, just if their shooting were better, they would have been sort of, especially in the first half, they had some key moments.
I think it's becoming a little bit of a theme for them that they've played well in a lot of games in recent seasons, but they haven't got the results, and now is the time to start delivering on that, I guess. But you would think that they will be okay to survive in Division 1 and hopefully make an impact then in the Championship as well. But
great atmosphere in Galway by the looks of it. I mean, there were nearly 10,000 there. Obviously the game hinged on that sort of red card and Cork's rally in that 2 minutes, but like the hurling is just going to be set up very nicely, I think, this year. Like,
well, you mentioned the crowd, Johnny. It's interesting that much of the talk around the league has been about the lack of emphasis that teams maybe are placing on it. But then you tally that with the crowds that we've seen so far. I was in Limerick on Saturday night. There was over 15,000. Port Aquive the week before, there was around 20. You mentioned
these
Pierce
are
Stadium
insane figures for matches that like
they are.
Yeah, everybody says, "Oh, this doesn't matter. It's not important," but like it's just clear the pent-up desire for people to watch inter-county hurling.
Yeah, and wonder will it sustain itself now as we move into Championship? You'd imagine that it will.
I think it probably. I mean, the Championship crowds I think are going to be absolutely bumper.
The league can fall off a little bit, obviously, but people want.
Once the weather gets good, you know.
Yeah, like you could see Pierce saying the pitch wasn't great. I mean, it's this time of year.
Pitches are not good anywhere at the moment.
Well, I have to say, I was in the Gaelic grounds in Limerick now. That looked good.
Sorry, I didn't see that one.
Yeah.
Nolan Park, not great.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, it's the time of year and stuff like that. But there's so many interesting storylines in hurling now. When you've Kilkenny under new management, Tipperary with that big win yesterday in Nolan Park under a new manager.
Jason Ford scored 2 points in about 4.5 seconds.
Yeah.
One of them like sideline from about 150 yards out, and then nips in and gets the short puck out immediately afterwards. And you're like, holy shit. And then afterwards they're doing the post-match on TG Cahir, and they're like, Jason Ford scored 114, and it's like, Noel McGrath's like, was it that much?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not bad.
Yeah, it's incredible tallies. And then Micheál Houlihan scored 12 points, I think, for Limerick on Saturday night. McCarthy in the corner for Clare scored something like 12 or 13 as well.
Is this like, have they just been hiding him away, kind of going?
Well, I mean, it's funny because John Kiley speaking afterwards, and everyone was praising his performance, and he's like, well, you know, you have to take your chance when you get in, and that's the way it is with Limerick now. So I mean, scoring 12 points obviously is huge, but you've got to take your opportunity when you're in there, and Limerick still has so many players to come back. And one of the striking things when you watch Limerick live, and both of you have as well, is just the physicality that they have. It looks to be a long way ahead of everybody else right now, and I'm not sure, it takes time to close that gap. Cork have started the season well, but they're probably a little bit behind in terms of the S&C work that they have to do, and they have a really young team as well. But Limerick, just the depth that they have, the conditioning that they have.
I'm just looking up Micheál Houlihan. He's 26. Well, he's born in 97 according to Wikipedia, so he's not a young fella.
Yeah.
Younger than we are, but yeah.
I know, but like
Might
some
be
people
26.
to be breaking through to an inter-county team.
True.
You know,
just insanely difficult at Limerick. Like it's like.
Well, that's the thing. If they can find a player who's capable of scoring heavily, that's all they need, because they still have, like, you know, some other players to reintegrate, and we'll see what happens with the Aaron Glan situation. But you know, Cian Lynch is slowly getting back to being Cian Lynch.
Yeah,
like, this team is still looking pretty ominous.
Yeah, I think that was his first start in 10 months the last night. But yeah, again, the league, it's hard to read too much into it in that teams can be in heavy training blocks, and Clare looked a little bit flat the last night, and you just wonder where they're at in terms of their building for the year. But they were without Tony Kelly, they were without John Quinlan as well, so they look
mentioned as well, like TG Cahir, like it is mad how all of a sudden there are so many games on. You can, you know, from a position where the league was hardly shown at all not that long. And it's like, TG Cahir is just throwing everything at Gaelic games at the moment. And you've so much opportunity. Watch deferred coverage, watch 3 games. I think 3 games yesterday, was it? It's incredible.
Well, have been between deferred coverage and everything as well, and BBC and RTE are showing games every weekend. So again, the appetite is there from a viewer's point of view as well at home, and between football and hurling.
I do, and I've made this point a couple of times, I do think that we haven't quite worked out exactly what the importance of the league is going to be. I think there's probably going to be an overreaction to how bad the teams who went deepest in the league last year were in the championship, but that may prove to be pardon me, an outlier as time goes on, because we haven't had this split season, shortened year, league, round robin, All-Ireland series properly.
That's right.
We have one season of evidence of it, and everyone's like, oh, it didn't matter last year because Cork and Waterford were both shite when the championship rolled down. But that's not going to necessarily be the case. That sample size is tiny.
Yeah, and it's the contrast then between the football and the hurling, where the football league is so important. Like, you look at Monaghan and Galway in Division 1 who are struggling a little bit, and they're kind of looking over their shoulders saying, well, we're probably not going to win an All-Ireland from Division 2 if we get relegated. Whereas the Division 1 of the hurling league, they're really, like, Clare played poorly on Saturday night, they're not going to get relegated, regardless of how bad their form is over the next few weeks. And you have that training blocks that they like to call, where you need to get the heavy work into the legs, and you might sacrifice a league game or two.
And it seems Limerick did that last year.
Yeah, exactly. And it worked out pretty okay for them. So a long way to go. But elsewhere, there was some golf last night. Rory McIlroy is no longer the world number one. Scotty Scheffler back to the top of the rankings. He won the Phoenix Open title on 19 under par. Seamus Power finished in a tie for 20th on 7 under. McIlroy was 4 under par. And the Irish women's cricket side begin their T20 Cricket World Cup campaign at lunchtime this afternoon. They take on England in South Africa. 1 o'clock start for that one. And Ireland in some good form going into that tournament because they beat the world champions Australia in their final warm-up match last week. So best of luck to them.
Is there a possibility that Everton absolutely crush Liverpool tonight?
I wouldn't. I mean, I think Liverpool.
A routine 2-0 victory.
Everton are 9-2 or something like that.
Are they?
Yeah, it's a hard game to whip. I think the crowd is going to be very interesting tonight. I think that Liverpool's home record, in fairness, has generally been good. I think the crowd will be massively behind them. I don't know though. It's a perfect storm as well.
9-2 seems ridiculously big. Is it not? Is this not much closer to a 50-50 game than we've seen, certainly between these two sides? But like,
it shouldn't be a 50-50 game though. Like really.
But I mean, it is.
It's not a 50-50 game.
It is because
Liverpool are still a better team than Everton.
Liverpool are being destroyed by mediocre sides in the Premier League in the last 8 to 10 weeks.
Generally away though. I think at Anfield they are the slight, like they beat Man City at home still. I expect them to win tonight, but. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a brilliant game to be able to look forward to for so many levels of where is Klopp at mentally at the moment and how is this team just collapsed, and then you obviously have the Everton revival. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how it pans out. You've got Southampton now looking for a new manager as well, so I think Dyche is a great appointment for Everton.
Yeah, I just mentioned as well that just the death of Theo O'Donnell as well, an absolute legend, and would have spawned so many sort of football and dynasty really, but just people WhatsApped me this morning what an absolute gentleman this man was, and so much love for him as well. I know he'd been ill, but yeah.
Okay, our condolences to his family. It's 8:50. If you want to get involved this morning, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Sarah Donovan's going to join us to look back on the weekend's hurling next. First, here's some Brian Kerr goodness talking about how Kyle Walker is underrated.
When we look back at the great Premier League defenders of the last 10 years, he's probably not a name that springs to mind straight away, but he's been a part of a hugely successful Manchester City team. He's been a big part of the England squad as well, as they've gone through a really successful spell. How good a player is he?
Well, he's been a fantastic player. He went from Spurs. Spurs would have been probably disappointed to lose him. He was an out-and-out right back for them. There's always a little bit, with his game, is about power, pace, strength. Not always great reading, I'd say, of the game as a defensive full-back. And there's often an error in him, in a bit of wildness in his play. And we've seen that at City at times and with England at times, where he makes mistakes high up the pitch, and his recovery, while he has all the pace, it was almost like, to me, I'd say, the penny doesn't drop quick enough that they're in trouble and he's got to get himself back from that position. And that little bit of vulnerability and mistakes that I think that I spot in this game would reduce his presence in the list of great defensive players. But he's been part of a great Manchester City team, and a first choice pick, as you said, when he's fit. He's 32 now. Always with City's players, they've had such a good squad, not a deep squad, but such a solid group of about 18, 17, that he can rotate them. I always look at the figures at the end of the season, the start of a new season. You look at them, and there'll be about 8 or 9 players who play about between 27, 28 games and 32, 33. Very few players play 35, 36, 37 because he's always protecting them for something, whether it was Champions League, Cup games, whatever it is, rotating them. And Walker has been one of those that's up in the high numbers. So he's a key player for them.
That's Brian Kerr there. You'll get that goodness on the OTB Podcast Network. Just subscribe to our football feed wherever you get your podcasts. Mike Carlson's going to talk to us about the Super Bowl in about 20 minutes' time, assuming he wakes up. In the meantime, Sarah Donovan is with us in studio to look back on the weekend's hurling. Sarah, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good.
Feeling it as a Cork hurling fan at the moment?
It was interesting that others had put Galway ahead of Cork after last weekend, so I was glad that they went out and got the result against Galway. So
power rankings dig, is it?
14-man Galway, to be fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that, but that was early second half, 2 yellow cards.
Scored like two goals straight after, so.
2-3.
Sorry, do red cards not count? Is there some special prize you get for losing the game when you're 14 men?
Couldn't see what happened. So there we go.
Jeez, Johnny, I didn't know we were going to go toe to toe so early in the morning.
Good game of hurling though.
Yeah, from 18 different scorers. Galway had 10 different scorers. Cork had 8 different scorers. Cork are a bit like Tip at the minute. They're holding on to their older guards, the likes of Conor Lehan. He scored 2-3, and then they're kind of peppering it with new talent. Sean Toomey, Corsi's man, scores 2 great goals. It's interesting to see how Pat Ryan is mixing the old and the new. Hoggy was out obviously through injury, so Lehan had the captaincy, and I thought Lehan led the line really well.
Is the plan for them both to play together later in the year, do you think?
Absolutely.
It is, yeah?
It is. I would say that Hoggy would be on the inside line and Lehan would be outside. But then you're looking at the change in the Cork, I suppose the size of the players coming into the setup. They look more like Galway. They're all 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", and I suppose in recent years that's what Cork were lacking around the half forward line. Declan Dalton yesterday scored 6 points from playing the first half. His striking is impeccable. Lucky to stay on the field in the second half. You know, same kind of incident as Stephen Bennett last week for Waterford, and as the TG Carter lad said, lesh. You know, really lucky lad to stay on the field yesterday. But you know, outside of that, I suppose moment of madness, he was impeccable for Cork. And
we were just saying there, like, can you get away with the more diminutive player? Do you need at this stage, with the way Limerick are, to actually go that physical kind of formidable player? Like,
I think you have to. It's interesting that Limerick, bar Shane O'Brien, who's the only lad who's probably a little light, are all 6'4", 6'5". Kyle Hayes is 6'7". You know, and he's tipping up the field Saturday night, scoring 3 points at his ease. They're an incredibly good team to watch.
Good touch for a big man, are Kyle Hayes
and Garrod Hegarty.
It is insane when you think about like just the collection of athletes that they've produced who are also incredible stick men. But to go back to Cork, Johnny was wondering about Pat Ryan and what do we know about Pat Ryan and what his team is going to be as an expression of him and what his ideals are and what does he want them to be?
Intensity first, work rate. I suppose Pat Ryan, as a player with SARS and as a manager with SARS, they were very structured, very organised. They won their own ball. A lot of different options for scores. They weren't reliant on one player. So from Pat Ryan, I suppose what he did with the 20s and how he's gone into the senior setup, he's thrown the net far and wide. Lots of different clubs involved in the setup now. The Bars have won the county last year. Yesterday, I think Brian Hayes was the only Bars player. He isn't shy about, I suppose, mixing up the different talents, because Cork is a big county and everyone always tells us the Cork is a big county. There's lots and lots of clubs, so he's giving everyone opportunities, which I like. I don't know what his Championship 15 is going to look like. Luke Meade had an incredible game last Saturday night against Limerick, and he comes on yesterday. You know, it's interesting. He hasn't stuck with the spine. I know I'm jumping, but Dublin seem to have stuck with the spine. Owen O'Donnell, Conor Burke, midfield Chris O'Leary, centre forward Donald Burke. You know, he seems to have an emphasis, whereas Cork are still mixing it.
And that has, I guess, always been a difficulty for anybody coming in. The size and scale of the population is a blessing and a curse, depending on your ability to filter for the good stuff in it.
Well, if you look at Kingston, and I suppose the changes that Pat Ryan has made this year and the players that he's brought in and the players that he's looking at, it's completely different personalities in the setup this year. So you can be lucky or you can be very unlucky in Cork, because if you get an opportunity and you take it, great, or you'll never be seen.
And that in work rate and intensity is the type of thing that, I guess, is that the characters that he's looking for? First off, if once you hit that level, then you're going to be allowed to express yourself?
There's massive criticism over the last number of years, and I was obviously leading the line in some aspects. Incredible frustration going to games and seeing Cork players allow play to develop, the other teams getting scores at their ease, you know, not laying a glove on players. This year, there seems to be a real work rate. I think last
there were a lot of turnovers where like Galway just coughed up the ball and like quick point, like.
Yeah, and look, and if you look at the change in work rate for Cork last week against Limerick, and I think they increased their tackle count by 40 tackles in the second half. They have to go after the tackle and they have to go after those balls.
It's funny, we had Anthony Nash on Friday, and he actually said that the second half and the first half wasn't just a pickup of like intensity, so it wasn't just banging the table at half time. Like tactically, that they changed the position in the half forward line, which actually allowed them to get closer to their opponents. So it was kind of it's not just a simple we want you to work harder. It's like, okay, well, you're not putting in your position. We're not putting you in the position to succeed. What's wrong? And that was one of the things that he took
because
from that,
you have to be able to lay a glove on the player. Like you look at the scores across the games over the weekend, teams are hitting 30 scores because teams are stepping off and allowing the play to develop. It's not the best kind of game to watch. You want high intensity. You want the Kieran Joyce type blocks against Limerick last Saturday night. That's what you want to see in a game, not a lad scoring a ball from 60 yards.
The Cork Galway game, for people who didn't see it, was it looks on the scoreline like it's relatively close at the end, but Cork hammered Galway until injury time.
Sorry,
really,
they didn't hammer them. There was a 2-3 moment in the game. Galway were like every bit as good as Cork essentially in that game.
Okay,
but for much of it, they had 14 men. Like that was the key moment.
So
in the
you're
game.
actually feeling
Galway
pretty good
missed a
about
penalty where they're one score off leveling the game at the end. So Galway, like you're bringing back Cathal Mannion, who like is just easing his way back in. Quinlan had a fairly quiet first 40-50 minutes. Like Galway, loads of positives out of that game. I think
you're very happy with how it looked.
Oh yeah, but like Galway, it's early days for Galway. Like I mean, they didn't hammer them at all. Like there was no suggestion.
Well, it was a 10-point game in stoppage time.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
Reduced
it
the
wasn't that
deficit
type
from
of
11
game.
to 4.
Yeah, the sending off was key. There was a mad moment, like couple of minutes, and that was it. Like, but Galway would fancy themselves to beat Cork for the game or tomorrow. Like,
that's
in my view.
All right.
What was your question?
No, there was no. It was just an observation. Just an observation.
I'd be very confident if Cork were to play Galway in an All-Ireland quarter-final this year. I think they got a lot of flack last time.
The interesting one for Galway is like few decisions probably around the forward line. Who's he gonna like? Will Nyland start? Is he reliant on him for his frees? Is he good enough? Sort of. I think probably Henry is like he's not sure if he's best 15 at all at the moment.
No, but they had 10 different scores yesterday, so he has time. I suppose how much store is he going to put on the league? He certainly doesn't have a set 15.
The one worry from Galway's perspective is they coughed up a lot of scores, like in fairness. Even the first half, they coughed up a lot of scores.
Well, I think Garrow McInerney yesterday, Sean Toomey skipped past him for the goal. I think you're relying too heavily on McInerney and he's got a lot of time in the legs.
The only thing about that is, right, and like famously, Jackie Tyrrell would have responded to similar levels of criticism by then going out and having one of his all-time great years. Like I would back Gerard McInerney to come back. I don't need him to be world class in the first 2 weeks of the league, but I do need him to be fully fit and get the hurling into the legs, get the fitness. So
you're saying it's like Seamus Callan, it's like Jason Flynn, it's like putting store on these guys in the early rounds of the league to get that.
You get the hurling into them, get the game time, and then
level off, taper off.
Well, you can make the decision if they're still up to it. But I thought Seamus Callan looked as fit as I've seen him looking at this portion of the year before, and. I don't know. I think there's something about this Tipperary team this year as well, which is going to be interesting. Hard to know because I'm not sure what the story is with Kilkenny.
I'm a little disappointed with Tipperary in that this is no criticism against Liam Gall, and I know the Fitzgibbon has obviously taken lots of players, and we have to, I suppose, temper this by saying the lads were out Thursday night and they put in massive shifts on Thursday night for the different teams and the different clubs. I think Tip should have more players coming in. Reliant again on Flynn, Callan, Morris. Where are the young lads? Where are the minors, the 21s? If Limerick are able to pepper their team with this talent, how come Tip aren't doing it?
If anybody is going to do it, though, it's going to be him, right? And maybe he. I often think about like the. If you remember when Casemiro signed for Man United, they didn't put him in the team straight away, and he's like clearly the best player, most expensive, most important player. Whereas he put Anthony straight in the team, and you're like, what's going on here? But they were just getting him up to speed and going, okay, we're setting a culture in place here where those kids are going to come in and get a place off Seamus Callan straight away.
No. Okay.
Do you know, that's what I think. There's a bit of that going on. And
I think though Limerick are doing it better than anyone right now.
Yeah,
like
from
Limerick,
a position of strength though.
So if you look at Saturday night, you look at Micheál Houlihan scores 12 points, Shane O'Brien scores 2 points, Adam English scored 2 points, and Donegal O'Donnell scored the goal. 116 from their lesser lights Saturday night. Any other county team would be skipping out the gate if their lesser lights had scored 116.
they're in that sweet spot that Kilkenny were in and that the Dubs were in, where if they get 2 players to add to their starting 15, and yet, I mean, look, I don't know. That's why we're trying to work out the importance of this league. With the shortened season, it's going to be much easier for players to put in 3 or 4 good performances in the league and buy the opportunity to get into the championship team in a way that in previous years it might not have been, I think. So maybe we're underrating the value of this league.
I've very much enjoyed the last 2 weekends from the point of view of understanding where the different teams are in terms of their development phase. So I would say Limerick, a store, they've like a conveyor belt of players coming through. Worryingly, I don't know, is it going to cause issues for the more established players? I think Seamus Flanagan the last 2 days has missed Gillan massively, and he's getting to grips with how these new players are running, making their moves, and I wonder, what we'll see later in the league. Will Flanagan get into it? But right now he's missing Gillan.
Yeah, I mean, it's let's all wait and see exactly what happens with that situation. The Dubs, right? You talked about the spine of the Dublin team. Is there? Micheál O'Donoghue was smiling and laughing in the post-match press conference, which you didn't see from him a lot over the years. He seemed really happy, just very excited to be back involved.
Yeah, look, the Dublin setup yesterday was interesting. This Dublin team reminds me of the Cork team kind of 3 years ago. A load of young lads who love hurling, the likes of Conor Donoghue, Cian O'Sullivan last week with the 2 goals against Waterford. But they're going to need bulk, and it's going to take 2 or 3 seasons to put that bulk on them. They're so lean, they're so neat, they're flying up and down the field. But that second half spell that Antrim had yesterday, I was behind the goal in Parnell Park yesterday where that Antrim were scoring into in the second half, and Neil McManus is a wizard, lads. I like the catch out of the sky. He takes Gibbons, and Gibbons a massive save, and then he goes 2 minutes later and he wallops the crossbar, and then Keelan Malloy comes in out of nothing like a train. Keelan Malloy is the best man to run off the shoulder. If anyone wants, we spend our whole lifetime on the field trying to coach players to run off the shoulder. Keelan Malloy's goals yesterday, exceptional. But from Dublin's point of view yesterday, as good as they were in the first half, they went 15-8 ahead.
Got complacent, I guess.
I don't think it was complacent. It was just Antrim decided in the second half to pick a pocket. So Conor Burke's at centre back. He loves to go forward, and there's a space opens up if he goes forward. And I don't know if Burke is going to be the 6 for Micheál in the long run because of the fact that he loves to go forward, and he wouldn't have ordinarily played for at 6 for Vincent's. I think that they need a tighter structure in their defence, and that allowed Antrim to come back to 3 points yesterday, having been out of the game completely.
Does that suggest that both these teams could do more as the season progresses, or
have they reached their ceiling?
It's hard to know, isn't it? Because I'm obviously desperate for Antrim to make a bit of a breakthrough, and for the Dubs. I think it'd be really good for hurling generally if these two were teams that were capable of, taking proper scalps.
I think from Dublin's point of view, as I said, it's that muscle, that muscle bulk. They've 2 or 3 seasons where they're going to have to add 15 kgs a man. It's scary, but that's what we're looking at when you compare them to Limerick, to Galway.
Well, hopefully this is the start of the Micheál Donoghue project, and he sees that through, because that would be really important to have somebody with his skill set and nous and clearly charisma in getting the players to play. O'Donnell, no mention of him playing for the footballers at the moment. So.
No, and he got another score again yesterday. He's 2 from 2 weeks in a row, so I wonder, will that trend continue?
I thought the Antrim body language was interesting in the game. I thought they played with a great spirit, and a great sort of belief in what they were doing as well.
Second half.
Yeah, but even the first half, they had a lot of bad wides. There was a great moment where they missed a goal chance, Dublin went down, scored a point, and Antrim, are they on the cusp of something? Well, I'm not sure what that something is, but they're really pushing teams pretty close.
I don't know if that's a kind of a come off from the fact that the likes of Malloy and Cunning were playing right up until Christmas with their club. Will they actually burn out come June? It's been a long year for that group, Dunloy, and the benefit of them playing to that time is they're actually at full tilt right now. So are we getting the best out of them right now?
With all due respect, there's no excuse for Antrim not to be good, considering that they have a load of educational establishments who are no doubt interested in helping third level students. They've got 2 pockets in North County and in the city, and
it's pockets though.
Yeah, but it's numbers. They also have numbers. The population of Belfast is absolutely massive. Anyway.
I do think though it takes a lot to get games into them. Look, lads, it's hard to travel up and down the country to get key games. It's much easier for Tip to cross the border and get a decent game than it is for Antrim to come down 4 hours.
No, totally.
Commitment, expenses, everything.
Yeah.
It all adds up.
Yeah, but fingers crossed they're on the verge of a breakthrough. Are any concerns about Kilkenny at this point?
Yeah, many. Yeah, I lacked complete edge yesterday against Tip. Overplaying the ball. Their decision making was completely off. I was very frustrated with them, I'll be honest. You were thinking, give the ball now, and then it was an overplay and overpass. Nervousness.
It has to be a massive shock to the system, though, trying to get over like this regime that was there so long. Like, it has to take a long time to get over the Cody reign. Like,
but Ling was around the setup.
It's not the same though. Like Brian Cody, but like he's gone, and that is going to take time.
Well, look, I didn't expect fire and brimstone from them yesterday, right? Okay, but I did expect a cohesiveness from the setup, because there is enough players there to, I suppose, to continue. The good form from last year. But
what were they trying to do? I
play the ball through the lines, and it was breaking down, but they were overpassing the ball, so they'd get it to the half back line, and instead of pinging a pass into the likes of Billy Drennan, who loves a quick ball, they went an extra man. Tip stepped up, the ball broke down. The second goal, or the first goal, was a concession. Was it the second goal? Was a concession from just a poor touch. Billy Ryan was about the only player who showed that physicality, that aerial prowess that we'd expect from Kilkenny normally, but very lacklustre, very off colour.
One last thing, Claire. Brian Lohan didn't speak to RTE afterwards or before the game. What do we expect from Clare this year? Like, was last year them in the Munster final a peak, or was that them a statement? Obviously, they're still missing players, key players, right? Yeah. So we're not reading too much into it. But again, fairly desperate for Clare to be at that level, to push Limerick in Munster, so that Limerick are coming out and everybody's like, okay, we've got tape now on what the problems with Limerick are when we reach the All Ireland series. But what's the truth about Clare?
If I'm going to be very fair to Lohan now, right? A lot of that Clare team is involved in Fitzgibbon. So the likes of Dermot Ryan, you can't expect him to play Thursday night and then have to come out Saturday night and give the same kind of performance against a Limerick team which doesn't have the same load on a weekly basis, right? The likes of Mark Rogers, again, same scenario, outplaying Fitzgibbon. That's the toll that is being taken on these players midweek, and then have to come out on a Saturday night and do it all. If he wanted to beat Limerick, genuinely wanted to make a statement against Limerick, he'd have started Kelly and Quinlan on Saturday night. He didn't. It's only 8 weeks championship. I know he'll be disappointed with the manner in which they conceded scores, and look, it took David Reedy to come on late on to actually give him a bit of a spur. I think he hit 1-2. I suppose it's just that if the Fitzgibbon wasn't happening last week, I think we'd have seen a different Clare team. But I think the Fitzgibbon is taking a lot of toll on those players.
Okay, that's fair enough. I wonder, is there a case for saying, screw the split season in hurling, we're just going to have hurling in summer for the championship, and that's it. Sorry, lads, I don't care, because it's a summer sport.
I did find watching it, like the pitch was just didn't, like, certainly in Galway, and it was hard for the lads to control the ball at times, and it was breaking up. Yeah, you can get away with it obviously in football.
Look, I'll be honest, Saturday night it took all my will not to turn off the Limerick Clare game and put on Happy Valley. Like, I tried.
What's Happy Valley?
Oh,
I only know there's a race course in Hong Kong. What is it?
It's a series on BBC One, and it's absolutely groundbreaking. But I was there going, okay, I'm going to give these lads 20 more minutes. That's of my time. I was so tepid. But look, from Limerick's point of view, they're scarily good. And it's the lesser lights, lads. You know, that's what we're looking at.
Last one here. Quirky 1980 says, Cork have been mixing the spine of the team for years and not really discovered anything different. Not sure when it comes to the championship, will they be any different down the middle from previous years?
Right. Well, look, Owen Downey's in full back this year, which is new. Kieran Joyce, this is his second year centre back. I think centre backs get a Tom Brady style kind of airing in Cork. You get a few years to settle in. In terms of midfield, Luke Meade, quality hurler last year. He didn't obviously get much favour in Cork, so nice to see him back in the setup this year. And then you've got Hoggy and Lehan. if Tip can hold on to Callan and Jason Ford for as long as they have, and the likes of Michael Breen, then we can hold on to our older guys as well.
All right, good stuff, Sarah. Thanks a million. It is 13 minutes past 9 this morning. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what's on Sports Radio for you today. 1 o'clock, OTB Gold is inside Harrington's Gaff. 3 o'clock, we've got Splunk. Classic is Ken Doherty. And OTB Gold is Lance at 6. After the break, Mike Carlson on the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl.
Generally, for these big games, it is a 4-3-3, and it's Rodri and De Bruyne and one of Bernardo Silva or Gundogan, and then either Foden or Grealish on the left, Mahrez on the right. Do you see him deviating from that on Wednesday night?
Well, if we look at today as an indicator, that Foden didn't come on till the last 20 minutes, and you mentioned it in the commentary that he always plays in the big games, Foden. The 20 minutes he got today didn't do an awful lot. Did you say he has to start? That's a reminder to the manager. He has to start. Like if you ask me now what his team would be, and I'm not very good at predicting his team. I'm usually fairly good at predicting most other teams. I'd say the team will be the goalkeeper, obviously enough, Walker, Diaz, Laporte, another midfield, Rodri, Gundogan, De Bruyne, and Mahrez under a little bit of pressure. That's 2 weeks in a row he's been taken off, but I still have him down to start. Haaland centre forward, and a toss up between Foden and Grealish for that position. The fact that Grealish was taken off early, I said I think he'd be in the starting team, but then I think the manager will debate it in his head of how influential Foden has been. So that's only leaving out the left back position, and I'm leaving that open because I can't ever predict his team. It's always end up, I try to go for 10 or 11. I usually end up with 7 or 8 right. So that's how I think it'll be. I think there'll be an element of respect. There'll be a lot of thought about Arteta knowing so much about how Pep thinks and how he lines up tactically. Arsenal are much more settled and predictable.
You're listening
to OTB AM. OTB GAA.
All-Ireland final in 2018, watched it in Croke Park, and I thought I was going to throw up. It was a horrible feeling. You wanted to win, but you just felt like, oh my God, if they do win, I haven't been there. Is it worth it being over here? So probably got very lucky in that way that for myself I didn't win it that year, because it would have been sick for me, but obviously great for them.
Subscribe to the OTB GAA podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, the Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl last night, 38-35. Mike Carlson is with us. Mike, is this really the story of Patrick Mahomes and his genius, or is there more to this?
Oh, there's a lot more to it, I think. One of the things is it may be the story of Patrick Mahomes' toughness. He re-injured the ankle that he'd hurt 2 weeks ago in the conference championship. And not only did he come back and play remarkably well, but in the first moments after the injury, when he was obviously in a lot of pain, he refused to go to the treatment tent back into the locker room as it was almost the end of the first half. But basically sat there until he felt like he could get up, and then kind of walked around as if he were normal, or as normal as possible. So I think there's that. And I think there's also, although he's obviously now with his second Super Bowl win, that kind of, in some people's mind, makes you an automatic Hall of Famer, but he's also been to 3 Super Bowls in the last 4 years. So he has sort of cemented his greatness. But I think that also is a sort of savor for Andy Reid, who in my mind was already a Hall of Fame coach, but his reputation in Philadelphia was someone who built consistently really good teams, but only got to the Super Bowl once and didn't win it. And then he won his first Super Bowl with Mahomes. And if he had lost this game, I think that same refrain you would have heard that from the pundits and the herd, that Andy Reid couldn't win the big one, but I think they've taken that monkey off their back now as well. So I think this sort of cements a kind of Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes legacy.
Right, yeah. Just I'm like Ger. I didn't see the Super Bowl. Sadly, I went to bed early last night, being like the professional that I am, and of course couldn't sleep. And I was halfway through. I was like, I might as well just stayed up and watch this bloody thing. I did see the end of the championship final though. That 3rd and 4 where he runs the ball. Obviously, the unnecessary roughness gives him a 15-yard penalty. But that moment where this man can't walk, not to mind run, and he runs a 3rd and 4 to basically get him to the Super Bowl. Like, where does that stand in those moments of the season?
He pretty much did the same thing again. He went on a scramble, and when it got to the end, and when tacklers were around, he started dodging tacklers, but he was literally tiptoeing. And I think that's kind of like it will, as you say, be a defining moment, because this is a guy who's an incredible passer, has as good a vision of the field and an awareness of where that ball should go or could go as almost anybody. And he plays through injuries. It's not the first time, probably won't be the last time, because he does take a lot of time. He's not afraid to stay in the pocket or to keep plays alive, and that is a recipe for getting hurt. Somewhere down the line, we've sort of seen it with Russell Wilson finally succumbing to an ankle injury after playing through injuries nonstop through his career, and he was a bit less effective this past season.
Yeah, just one. We spoke about Johnny Sexton. I don't know if you're familiar with Johnny Sexton, Mike. He's like the Irish out half. He's 37.
Yes. So, of course.
So 37.
And that was the real Super Bowl, was Ireland-France.
Yeah, and we actually, our first try actually was straight out of an NFL playbook. But Sexton he's a little bit different in terms of an out half. Certainly the way he tackles and he does things. But is Mahomes completely changing how the young quarterback looks at how a quarterback should be now, in terms of everything he does that is so much more than obviously just passing the ball?
Yeah, I mean, there is a change going on in terms of young quarterbacks, and mobility is a bigger factor coming out of college, because college football's offenses have really influenced the NFL in the last decade or so. But I think what Mahomes brings to it is that you're watching someone who is like an out half or like a creative playmaker in football, or a point guard in basketball, who sees everything and can deal the ball. And it's not a question of kind of like dealing it at short distances. He can do it at long distances as well. But if you were a young kid and like many kids, enamored by basketball and the flair and the flash of it, Patrick Mahomes brings that same kind of attitude toward football. And I don't think an American football quarterback kind of gets targeted automatically. Whereas Johnny Sexton gets targeted whether he's got the ball or not, and teams know that trying to put him out or slow him down, by hitting him hard and hitting them repeatedly is the way to do it. That's kind of like an American football attitude toward a player. But I think it's a good comparison.
Two things that we had anticipated heading into this was that the Philadelphia Eagles defensive line was the best unit on display, and that how they went, so the Eagles would go. But it turned out they didn't get a single sack on the night. Although, obviously there was the injury to Mahomes, which might have put a normal quarterback out and would have seen them win the game. Why were they so ineffective last night?
A lot of that was down to Mahomes. He got off quite a few passes while under pressure, and his ankle was injured while scrambling, so he was under pressure. I don't think they underperformed that much. Although Andrew Wiley, the Kansas City right tackle, did a great job on Hassan Reddick, who's their best single pass rusher, and their interior line did a really good job of keeping the big guys, the two big guys in the middle for Philadelphia, who rotate through. They rotate 4 or 5 players there, keeping them out of the backfield so that Mahomes actually could take a step forward and throw, which when that goes away, that's when sacks start to happen, because if the quarterback can't just simply climb the pocket and step forward, he gets hit trying to go out one side or the other. I thought the other really interesting thing was that their offensive line is really good, and we saw that through much of the game. but the Eagles' offensive line. But Andy Reid came out in the second half, and I had said at halftime to the crowd at the bar where I was hosting a Super Bowl party that I thought that strangely enough, the Eagles needed to try to run the ball in the second half, not play a panic kind of game. And Andy Reid came out and they ran an awful lot of counter plays where they were kind of going against the grain of that Eagle defensive line's penetration. And they worked really well. And even when they didn't work really well, when they only gained a couple of yards, say, it helped to set up their passing game. And Philadelphia adjusted pretty well in the second half to taking Jason Kelce away as a weapon, who had been the Chiefs' big weapon in the first half. They'd marched down the field for their first touchdown, pretty much behind Kelce's catching. And the Eagles came back, the Eagles came back with other options, which worked really well. And we saw, 2 touchdowns late in the game, which were basically the same play to different sides of the field and to different receivers, but where the Eagles would put a man in motion coming back toward the backfield, then he would stop and turn around and go back out. And the Eagles were overplaying that motion. And both times it was Kadarius Toney the first time and Sky Moore the second time. He was all alone for touchdowns, and great as Patrick Mahomes is, you have to give Andy Reid credit for play design and also for recognition that was a play that would work, and then to go back to it on the very next drive. And that was, kind of it was. My take on it basically is that it was a really even game, as the score would indicate. But you have to remember that the Chiefs are in the game because of a Jalen Hurts fumble, his one bad play of the game, which was returned for a touchdown, and then a really unexpected Kadarius Toney punt return that got them down. So the 2 big plays by the Eagles are what won them that game more than anything else. It kept them in the game.
The Jalen Hurts performance in the round was fairly astonishing for somebody making a Super Bowl debut, notwithstanding the fumble. Or in American sports, you get no credit for the 99 out of 100 things you do well, and everybody just remembers the fumble.
Yeah, it's funny. I said you could make a really good case before the MVP was announced for Hurts being the most valuable player of the game, because he really was doing almost everything for the Eagles. Now, the fumble does work against you. And strangely enough, the Eagles also had a second fumble for the same guy, Nick Bolton, returned it for a touchdown, and that was called back on one of those kind of interminable NFL video replays, Zapruder film, legal battle, parsing the language of the Talmud kind of decisions. And that could have changed the tempo of the game as well. But, that quarterback sneak that the Eagles run, which looks kind of like a maul in rugby, and someone ought to tell the American announcers to watch a rugby game and figure out exactly what the metaphor or what the parallel is. His passing was superb. The touchdown to AJ Brown was Mahomes like. He was leading his receiver to a place where he knew the ball, the receiver could get it, but throwing the ball well before the point that AJ Brown broke his route. He was accurate throughout, and I just thought it was a tremendous individual effort, which probably just, there's only ever been one MVP of a Super Bowl off a losing team, but I thought you could make a case for this. But I think you're right that the fumble probably took that possibility out of play.
That's got to be crazy. Like, surely the MVP played on the worst team more than once in Super Bowl history. Surely, I mean, you're talking about tight games here. Like,
you would think so.
History's written by the winners.
Well, they generally just give it to the quarterback, even when somebody else.
Yeah, and I've gone through. I did a piece a couple of years ago. Went through all the Super Bowl MVPs, trying to decide who really should be the MVP. And the funny thing is, there weren't many losing players who were in the mix for that award.
I guess the point about Jalen Hurts is he's still on his rookie contract, so the Philadelphia Eagles aren't going anywhere. Obviously the heartbreak of losing, there's traditionally been a hangover for teams who lose in such dramatic fashion, but we should expect the Eagles to be a good team for the next couple of years. One last thing I do want to talk about, and we hate talking about officiating, but it did feel like from watching the highlights that everybody's pissed off because they call a holding on a play when it would have been an earlier version and a much further out field goal. Booker missed a kick earlier on, so it wasn't going to be a gimme, and they hadn't called holding really across the game. So is it a legitimate call or is it not a legitimate call? What do you think?
In the early second quarter, there was James Bradbury was again covering Juju Smith-Schuster and did pretty much the same thing, and Mahomes was calling and the replay was shown and they hadn't called it. Consistency is always the first thing we ask of officials in any sport. Make a good call, make a bad call, but call it the same way each time. So that the argument, I have a lot of sympathy for the argument that the last 2 minutes of a game is a bad time to change your interpretation of the calls. To me, it was a hold, and it was a pretty obvious hold. And the argument that I don't buy is the quote unquote let the players play kind of argument, because if you're letting the defense hold, you're letting the defense play, but you're not letting the offense play.
Yeah.
So, I didn't really have a problem with it. And I'm pretty critical of the officiating, because they did pretty much let things go apart from offsides for most of the game. And but I think again, you're right, that the argument that it would have been a much more exciting finish had let's just assume Butker makes the field goal anyway, so which would have been about 35. The Eagles would have then had about a minute and 20 seconds or so to go downfield and just get a field goal to send it to overtime or potentially win the game. And I don't think anyone was doubting that was within the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
And just in your years following it, this must have been one of those years where it seemed like there were so many narratives as the season developed, with Mr. Irrelevant, obviously the 49ers, what was happening there, the emotion that the Buffalo Bills went through, and then the star quarterback basically hobbling through the end of the season. And there just seemed to be so much of a narrative for the last sort of few weeks of the season in general.
Yeah, I would hesitate to be crass and say that the more games you put in the season, the more of a chance of getting key people injured you add to the season. But had the Eagles been able to put Mahomes out of the game the way they put Brock Purdy out of the game in the first quarter against San Francisco, I think you might say that the football gods were being incredibly generous to them. So I'm glad Mahomes was able to continue that game. But it was a funny season, and I think it was funny partly because you didn't really have any great teams in the mix. The Eagles are a very good team and a balanced team, probably the best top to bottom in the league. The Chiefs are a good team with a great quarterback. So you basically had a really stacked team with lots of depth on both sides of the ball and the better line play on both sides of the ball, which is usually what we think is the recipe for a winning team. And their quarterback played at a very high level, which I know there are still Jalen Hurts doubters out there, and I think they would probably have been silenced. But in the end, it came down to which team has the best quarterback in the game. And that's Patrick Mahomes. And the idea that he might have gone out of the game with an injury would have been just too cruel, I think, for football. Much more cruel than anything the officials could do to us.
So what you're saying, it's ripe for the Jets next season. Rodgers signs and they win the Super Bowl.
Well, we have to see what happens when Aaron Rodgers comes out of his 4 days of total darkness and what he's thinking, or if he's thinking at all. I mean, at that point.
Jesus Christ only took 3 days and he came back and saved the world.
Last year, Tom Brady took 40 days in the desert to undo his retirement, his marriage, and his life. So Aaron Rodgers in 4 days could probably do a lot more. But, I like the idea, the rumor of Rodgers going to Las Vegas and reuniting again with Devontae Adams, which would be very interesting. And then he would also have a coach in Josh McDaniels who he might not show the same kind of disrespect for that he's been showing to his coaches for the past decade.
One last thing, Andy Reid was talking pre-match about potentially retiring. You can't retire now. He's got to come back and defend, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people who, what is he, 65 now? who thinks that, you know, going out on a high note is something worth preserving. It was advice I would have given Tom Brady a couple of years ago had he asked for it. But you look at Andy Reid and you know he loves football coaching. The only thing I can think of is if he really feels sympathy for Eric Bieniemy, his offensive coordinator, who is never going to get a chance to be a head coach. It's obvious he's constantly being interviewed. He's never being hired. And kind of like when Bruce Arians was being pushed, I think, out of the head coaching job in Tampa by Brady. But the line that he gave was that he wanted to step down to make sure that Todd Bowles, his defensive coordinator, got the chance to be a head coach again. And I could see that kind of a scenario happening. But frankly, Andy, what's better to keep you young at heart than having the best quarterback in the league to play with? And you know, he did a great job of you know, they let Tyreek Hill go in the offseason of picking up little pieces here and there and then using them. I think someone said during the game that Mahomes had thrown to more different receivers than any quarterback in the league. And, you know, that's that kind of chess game that coaches love to play. I get the feeling that after a few weeks, Andy's going to be scratching, you know, to get back into the office and start looking at college players.
Just very briefly for me, could Mahomes be the best of all time?
Yeah, I think he's certainly in with a shot, and he's certainly as skilled as any quarterback I've ever seen. You know, and he's like a young Tom Brady with a better arm. So yeah, he's certainly got that possibility.
Mike, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Thanks, Ger.
It's Mike Carlson, who of course was up all night basically, and still able to
he
put together.
He brings you back to, like, sometimes, you know, I was a kid watching the NFL. I was like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with my life here. I ended up being a journalist, and to think that I'm talking to this guy that I saw like on the screen, and when I saw him all those years ago, Mike, I was like, he had that smile. You're like, this guy is just a nice guy, and I've never met him, but I know that he is. What a man. And 65 going strong.
There you go. Murray Kinsella has tweeted that there will be a sighting from the Ireland-France game, and not entirely unexpected, but you know, probably too late for the result in the game. And you know, I do kind of wonder if this happens in a big game in the World Cup. Do they bottle it, or is this the official ending of the bottling of these decisions?
When does it end, Ger? Like, seriously. I mean, I know sometimes it can look worse in slow motion, but like, let's protect the player here. You don't tackle like that.
I mean, even I watched the game back, and Donald Lennon was like, I wouldn't mind seeing it in real time. So show it in real time.
Yeah.
You got to find the right camera angles, and you've got to also take into account that, like, it's difficult in the moment for the referees, but that's the whole point of having the TMO going, no, this is a high level of danger. It's a red card. And we're aware of this, and you'll thank us afterwards.
Absolutely.
So whatever they need to do to get to a point where that's more consistent. Consistency is all we're looking for. And Owen Morgan has announced his retirement from all forms of cricket. He says he's going to be in the commentary box from now on, so not going anywhere. So one of the greatest Irish cricket career.
Absolutely.
Obviously one of the all-time great England cricket careers. So definitely one of the all-time great Irish cricket careers too. So no doubt an inspiration to countless young fellas taking up the game.
Final question for Ger. Just put it on you. Do Ireland win the World Cup? Yes or no?
Feeling I think it's going to be too hard to beat so we now have the first, fourth and fifth in our group, and then we face the only other two good teams in the World Cup.
Yeah, it's that's a yes.
That's bullshit.
Yeah.
That, like, we should be marching in the streets of Paris about the World Cup draw. No, we're not coming. Redraw it.
What about the French? Like, bringing up the age of retirement 62 to 64, and they're totally up in arms. Like,
they're right.
Are they? 60? Would you want to retire at 62?
Yeah.
I'd be like, bring it on.
You just started.
Look at Mike Carlson, 65.
You just started. Right, tomorrow, Merseyside Derby fallout, more Six Nations reaction, and plenty more besides. Right now, Ronan O'Gara speaking with Joe after the game. Enjoy.
Mr. Ronan O'Gara joins us. Long time no talk. You're very welcome.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
So, even just glancing at the papers today and listening to various people talking in the aftermath yesterday, this is being talked about as one of the great test matches. Would you go along with all that?
Yeah, I would, yeah. I think it was, I was there actually in the ground, and I think it's great to actually see it live in front of you, because it's so much better than the angles you get in television, and you just can feel intensity and where the space is, or the lack of space in certain cases yesterday, and then just the work off the ball. There was some brilliant, I suppose, viewing and huge, I suppose, topics of interest that have come forward as a result of 46 minutes ball and play. I think usually it's 6 minutes more than any other game, and I think with that regard it was probably there's a new way potentially looking at the game from yesterday, how you break down big physical teams. I think the guys who thrived yesterday were probably the guys in green that had insane fitness levels, no more so than Hugo Keenan, I think, at 15, who had a huge game for me. And Caelan Doris at number 8 obviously was the standout for everybody, but Ringrose was taking his game to a new level, and it was I suppose so unique in the fact that there were so little errors in the game, yet it wouldn't be a shock to anybody here to say if Ireland scored 8 tries, because they were probably held up over the line 4 times, and then there was probably 3 occasions where they were 1 pass away from scoring, but that they probably obviously, as we now know, 1 try, the low try, should have been disallowed for foot and touch.
Yeah. Your point about those bigger men not thriving the way the Hugo Keenan body types are thriving. 2 thoughts on that. One, could you see France rethinking 6-2 split when they play Ireland? And secondly, France maybe played into those slimmer Irish hands in a way, because they were the number 1 kicking team in the championship last year. They didn't kick the ball as much yesterday. Ireland actually kicked more than them, which goes against the grain of these two sides. And what's more, France kept the ball in play a lot. I mean, it was like France said, it was like a team saying, we back our fitness the way they approached it. It was quite striking.
Yeah, it was. Just, I suppose, on the 6-2, to get straight to the point, they don't look upon it as that. They look at it at nearly a 6-3. So Macalou, in their eyes, has the capacity to play just as with ease on the wing.
Okay.
So they don't ever look upon it as only going with 2 backs. So, the big advantage when you can do that from a management point of view is that you stack your team up front and only 2 of your forwards have to play 80, which is a big advantage. While, if there's an early injury in the backs, obviously Jalibert goes in for them, and then Macalou would be the next person who, because of, I suppose, his physical abilities, he could comfortably play on the wing.
Yes.
But at test level, I'm not too sure, can he? But it isn't a weakness. And then, yes, I think, interestingly, on the kicking meters, I agree with you, Joe. I think, you think all these stables or these groups are impenetrable and criticism doesn't get to them. I think France had probably enough of criticism about they're the team that kicking the ball the most, but I think they overplayed in their half just to make a point, which is normally what they're very good at. And I think as a result of the high ball and play time and overplaying in their own half, I think they didn't have energy for probably the attack zone, apart from obviously the unstructured play where Dupont was still a menace all afternoon.
That's interesting. Were they being criticised in the French media for kicking the ball too much?
Yeah, there was definitely, obviously, because obviously you have to respect what they've done. They've gone 14 games, but nearly nowadays people aren't happy because they've gone a 14-game run, and there's always an angle into some team. And with England, with France, they became fascinated with possession for kind of games 1 to probably 10 of that campaign, and then for the November games and throughout the build up to the Six Nations, it was more deep possession, which means kicking it and backing their kind of blue wall of 13 defenders and 2 in the backfield.
Interesting.
But yeah, they were. There's huge interest in obviously the World Cup, but the Six Nations also, and I think just as an aside, you got a taste of what the atmosphere and the mood and ambience will be like going forward 6 months, because at times it felt like a home game for France yesterday.
They had 10,000 apparently in the stadium, and we more than heard them. So again, just on that kicking point to put a bow on it, last year France kicked the most in the Six Nations, Ireland kicked the least, but yesterday Ireland had 38 kicks to France's 35. I'm asking you to speculate a touch here, but is your sense that Galtier and the management team were happy for the team to kick less and run it more? Or do you actually think the players themselves, almost from deep, said, right, let's jouer and show everyone what we're about, and went off script a touch?
No, I don't think so, because it was interesting just because I read a few of the reports post-game, and Galtier had come out and said that we've overplayed our hand and probably in the Amber D zone, which is the kind of 22 to the 50 metre defensive zone. And then kind of Entamac obviously was interviewed probably at the same time, and he contradicted that in the fact that he said, well, we wouldn't have got Penno's try if we didn't play our chance our arm from deep, just deep inside their 22, because you don't practice those things, batting the ball along the ground and then just individual brilliance, and you get a bit of a push off and a missed tackle, and then the deceptive, I suppose, speed of Penno. But that's French rugby in a nutshell. I think sprung to mind for me was basically with the pace of the game being so intense, in the 5 metre line out, I think it was Jelance who didn't expect the ball knock on. That's a huge moment. So it was probably just the Ireland's ability to consistently keep France under pressure with their foot on the throat with a high ball and play time told dividends. And I think, reflecting on the game, it wouldn't have been an injustice at all if Ireland had finished 52-19.
Yes. What did you like most about Irish play then in particular?
I just loved the composure of the team from number 1 to 23, I suppose, whatever you call them, the deciders or the finishers, having a great impact on the game, because a lot of people in the public think this 1 to 15. These guys, 16 to 23, have more importance. And from where Ireland want to get to for winning a World Cup, the 9 and 10 replacements didn't miss a beat, added to the game, and that's what you want. You don't want to fill a gap, you want to add, and I felt everyone that came off the bench added, and that's so important to the mentality of the team. But there was an air of confidence looking at them, even when France went ahead. For Ireland to reply within probably 2 minutes is a big statement. Usually in those games it takes a little bit of time to get the energy back and get the flow back into your game, but Ireland just counter-attacked straight away, and Lowe's try was given within 2 minutes of the Penno try, which is quite a big statement. I think there is great detail in Ireland's forward play. I think their attacking ruck looks very good, but also I think you can't underestimate the I suppose the strict discipline of keeping the ball with some amazing imagination in the attack play. You look at Johnny's break up the left-hand side and a beautifully flowed pass into anticipated space.
Yes.
Caelan Doris looks like a guy who has more seconds on the ball than anyone I've seen, either a back or a forward. The pass, and obviously the weight of the pass is very, very important when you're offloading for the recipient. So the sympathy in the pass that he delivers is very, very interesting. But also, I suppose, their variety to just batter against the blue wall and then play out the back of that. And then they're just repeat efforts. They're incredibly fit. Incredibly fit team.
And that's now 2 matches if you take South Africa in November and France yesterday. 2 games where Ireland have managed to do just fine against the bigger team, which had been one of the big concerns hanging over this group.
Yeah, I think there's no comparison between South Africa and France for me in that regard. I think the performances were poles apart. France came to Dublin, they played, but they got outplayed by a fitter, smarter, unrelenting team. While the performance in November, even against Australia and South Africa, as well as they did to eke out a victory in difficult probably conditions, yesterday was a real battle of heavyweights, exactly.
Yeah, I saw the point was made even in Midi Olympique during the week. Apparently Galtier not thrilled with how many minutes his players have, the top 14 being a very demanding league, as you would well know, and there was a graphic where only 4 Irish players had more minutes than their opposite number. I think it was Ringrose, Ryan, Tyke Byrne and Porter, but otherwise the Irish team far better rested than their top 14 counterparts. Now, will that be the case come World Cup? Are you expecting almost a fresher France if it is Ireland-France in a quarter-final, or do you put much stock in that stat?
Well, there's an argument for however way you want to use it. I think one of the highest minutes on both sides was Ringrose.
He is, yeah.
And he's probably playing the best rugby of his life. Comfortably, I think he's added so many more aspects to his game, and his try was hugely deserved for not alone all the work and unseen work he did yesterday, but also in previous games. I think it's nice when someone like that gets the reward in a huge game, because there was huge finishing in it, just to dispose of Jalibert comme ça, like that, and then to, you have the confidence, and also that's McAloo coming. McAloo, I'd say, would run the 100 metres in 11 seconds, so he's no slouch. There's a potential to strip the ball there. You know what I mean? While a lot of people would be just dive down, but he also was thinking of, okay, we need 7 here, not 5. So respect for his kicker by going in and around by those 3 or 4 metres makes a big difference. And it becomes, with Ross Byrne's capability off the tee, it's astounding now that nearly any kick is a gimme, and he's put himself in probably a territory where very few players in the world are in that regard, because off the bench or in a tight game, it's a wonderful, it's like, a guy hitting 99 out of 100 fairways, doesn't miss.
Yeah. So minutes aren't hurting Ringrose. That's a very fair point. On Ross Byrne, is he rubber stamping his place now as Johnny's replacement in your eyes?
Oh yeah, most definitely, I think, because these games speak loudly, especially with all due respect, that's the top tier of European rugby yesterday. There isn't a bigger examination. There's people who could pick holes in it if it's an Italian or Scottish or a Welsh team, but England or France, these are incredibly difficult games, and the game still had to be won. At 55 minutes, it could have gone either way.
Why was he out in the cold for so long then? If it's also obvious to us now.
I think probably perception of the general public, perception of.
But Andy Farrell doesn't worry about the general public. He was out in the cold in Farrell's eye.
No, but I think it's on record that they've had discussions. He has worked in areas of his game, and I think you watch him playing for Leinster, he has added a lot more to his game than he would have. He would have had, and a small thing like being a threat himself, even though it's one work on, it has huge implications for the defenders inside him, the defenders opposite him, and the defenders outside him. So for people saying that capacity to take on the line, is huge in Test rugby, Joe, and he's added that into his game, but he's also given himself, I think, by smart preparation or manipulating the defence, he's given himself that opportunity to think a few phases ahead, to put himself in position to hit 50-22s, to show his kicking game, but also to show his link play.
Ireland are performing like this as well, we should say, amongst others, without Henshaw, without Gibson Park, without Furlong, Sexton gone after 49 minutes. It's hard not to get a little ahead of ourselves here. Are you increasingly confident that Ireland are going to do something special at the World Cup?
They could be, but thankfully I don't buy into that, because you got to live in the now, I think. And when you come like the difficulty now is, not difficulty, but the massive opportunity now is picking 31 to get on the plane becomes very difficult. I watched the numbers, 24 to 30 do the fitness before the kickoff yesterday. You had Caelan Blade, you had Keith Earls, you have there was Jimmy O'Brien, Larmer. There's these guys that are only itching for a go, and then, as you said, you've named a handful of
first teamers injured,
first teamers, which is very different to you bring that in now, and all of a sudden Finlay Bealham won't be too quick to hand over the bib to Tig when there's reps going, because he'll be kind of going, well, this team is going well and I'm in it. Same with McCluskey, with Henshaw, with Bundyaki. By doing the business in the starting team gives you that validation that I belong in this group. And even when someone like as a world-class player like Tig Furlan comes back, you cannot underestimate how good that is for your team when you have a world-class player, but also you have Bealham pulling out passes that we rarely associate from any other tight head props bar him. But that just shows the environment Farrell has created, O'Connell has created, Cat, Easterby. There's an incredible harmony, I think, between backs and forwards, and it's a pleasure to watch.
On the Keenan try, this is probably a semi-technical question which can be hard over the radio, but you can explain it as best you can. That move was out of the Joe Schmidt playbook, and we would have seen, for instance, Leinster did it against Claremont maybe just over a decade ago, and it was Rob Kearney going through the gap instead of Keenan. The point of difference I saw people made yesterday is that generally these have been off set piece before, whereas actually Ireland managed to put together that set piece move almost from open play. It was, I think it was a kick, and I think Doris took it up and away they went. Is that particularly impressive? Is that unusual?
It's actually broke down really well by Murray Kinsella today, actually. So anyone who's into that technical, it's descriptive second by second. So for the rugby nerds out there, it's a good read.
But it would usually be off a line out or something, I guess, is the point.
But very easy to, I suppose, describe, Joe. Like in terms of the line out, you either hit a near channel, a middle channel, or a wide channel. It's the same. It was a reception of a 22 dropout.
Yeah.
So very easy to understand who's chasing in the blue wall, who's on the chip space, and who's in the backfield in Ireland. You can see it, the working off the ball. It's completely pre-planned, pre-scripted, but they'll detail in, Peter O'Mahony's role and people deep cleaning, not obstructing by, because obviously what happens in a lot of these cases, which will become more prevalent, I think, as we go towards the World Cup, will be, it's one thing scoring the try on the pitch, but then it has to be validated by the TMO. So any of that blocking or pulling where you think you've got them becomes open for debate once the try has been awarded.
You got to be subtle, you got to bring in your core your core cuteness and do it that way.
Exactly, very, very subtle, but it's another example of not doing the simple things well, because look how many times the -1 defender doesn't cut under the ruck, or the 2 defender has to go forward on the defensive ruck every time. But that's what you ask for in an honest environment, that the players continuously do that, because you don't know when you're going to be called on. And at that level, it's taking a try like that for Sean Edwards would be a sickening blow.
Yes. No more than when La Rochelle played Leinster in the Champions Cup final. You're a good man to look at a team who are flying and spot a weakness and a way to make their lives difficult. When you look at this Irish team, if you were an opposition coach, is there a chink there that you would go after?
There's always chinks. Do I have one offhand? And have I thought about that question? No, I haven't. But I think Ireland still have to be not at peak, but they have to be on to be expecting to win these games. All of a sudden now, there'll be this assumption, you know what I mean, that the England game, and that happened, I know, a few years ago, where everyone was talking about how many points would Ireland put in England. England won. And that's not too much of a distant memory, I think. The game, obviously, that's becoming hugely interesting now is Scotland in Murrayfield, because home advantage is big. And they're absolutely tails are up, so that becomes a juicy game. And I think France missed Dante. I don't think they had that kind of attacking threat to do damage in the Ireland's midfield like they have done in the past. There's always entries into the team, but where Ireland, I think, are excelling at the minute is that they're very much a threat with the ball, either through a battering game or lovely little bits of deception.
Yes. I'm going to do something terrible here and take the Italy game for granted, okay. I'm thinking back to 2009 against Scotland. Kidney rested a few players and it was a touch squeaky for a few minutes in that game, but Ireland got the job done. Do you suspect Farrell will go full strength Murrayfield?
Yeah, exactly. But that's the beauty of having the decision. Do you want to finish with your best 15 or start your best 15? And I think now we have got to the stage where there is a difficult selection meeting about what is your best 15 and what is your best 15 to start and what is your best 15 to finish the game. You look at McCluskey, he's taken his chance very well. Does it weaken the team starting Bundyaki or Robbie Henshaw? There's different rules for probably the Gibson Park, Henshaw, Furlong, who have a lot of credit in the bank.
Yeah. But I'd almost count all of those as full strength. I'm talking about he's not going to go more extreme than that and give third man, fourth man opportunity. He's going to go out to win this Grand Slam full bore.
Oh yeah, most definitely. But I think you don't really need to do that. I think what you can do in terms of, if you have 10 backs that are rotating, maybe there might be two changes in the 10 backs, and there might be, of the 13 forwards, there might be 11 of the same. So that's 4 is quite expected, but all.
OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor.